All right, hello all. Let's begin our Carlisle Select Board meeting on Tuesday, January 25th. Thank you all for coming. I see a variety of people on the call in addition to the Select Board members. I would like first to just do a quick review of the agenda for tonight. We just came out of an executive session. We are going to take a moment at the beginning of this meeting for any general community input. Then Chief Fisher is going to provide us with an LEPC update. We are going to have the opportunity to meet the candidate for our assessor's position here in Carlisle, which is very exciting. And then we'll have a brief conversation about the pickleball facility and next steps. Then a meeting with Madeline Blake from the Planning Board, and I think possibly John Mativier, to discuss the joint Select Board and Planning Board meeting next week, where we will hear from the Master Plan Steering Committee their draft plan. Then we are going to receive a motion from the Carlisle Transfer Station Task Force about their recommendations going forward. Followed by another conversation with Chief Fisher around the police staffing and the hiring of a new officer potentially. Then we'll be meeting with the one of the firms that we're considering to help us with the search process for an interim town administrator. We'll go over the town warrant articles that we've received, the town administrator's report, then liaison reports, and finally an approval of minutes and warrants with a goal of adjourning at 10 p.m. So with that, I'd like to ask if there are any members of the public on the call who would like to make a general comment during the community input time. If you either go down to the bottom of your screen and click on the reactions, there's a way to raise your hand there, or if you just want to raise, if you have your picture up, if you're live, you can just raise your hand and either I or someone else will call on you. Oh, I think I see, is that David Friedman? Yes, David, you're recognized to make a comment.
So I came into the town hall today and talked to Tim. I'm on the board of the Carlisle Conservation Foundation, and we voted at our last meeting that we wanted to donate to Town Hall a copy of this poster, Trail Markers in Carlisle, which has the art that all of the Carlisle Middle School students did that's on the trail markers around town. Thought it might be a nice thing to be in Town Hall and represent the school and the work that the Trails Committee and CCF does with the number one important value of Carlisle, the open space. So wanted to let you know that and see if it's all right with you all if I arrange with Bill Rizzo perhaps to find a suitable place in Town Hall and put this lovely poster up.
Thank you so much, David, and to the CCF. It's just awesome. Really, really, really awesome. Thank you.
I agree,
remember,
David.
Oh, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, David, that would make a great poster that we could sell, like at Old Home Day or something. I'd love to have a poster of that picture. Is there a way to do that before maybe Town Hall can do it once we bring it over there?
This is a framed poster. We have made it as a poster.
Do you sell it as a poster?
It exists as a poster, and CCF gave it as a
okay.
benefit for people who donated a certain amount the last 2 years. And we
probably have it. Then you're saying I probably have it.
Yeah, you missed your chance, David.
No,
yeah.
I'm a big donor to CCF, so I'm sure I have it. All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Thank
Well, yeah, let me just say on behalf of the board, David, we very much appreciate the donation and are happy to have it find a good home at Town Hall.
Great.
And thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments from the public during this community input time? Seeing none, then I'm going to move on and ask Chief Fisher, please, to give us the LEPC report for this evening.
Good evening, all. That's a tough act to follow. So a couple things were addressed at the LEPC meeting yesterday. The first is Board of Health reported we did have a bit of a rough January with 263 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Carlisle. But Linda Fantasia did report that that's ebbing at this point. And Chief Soros also confirmed that because the fire department's doing a majority of the testing here in Carlisle, which brings me to my next point. The Carlisle Fire Department is still doing an incredible job of testing Carlisle residents, employees, or people associated with Carlisle at the fire department. Their testing has also dropped off a little bit, but Chief Soros did report that the positive tests as a percentage are still about the same. And the Carlisle Fire Department is going to continue testing at this time. And we're going to take a look at that again in a few weeks at our next LEPC meeting. Those of you familiar with the school know that the school department has adopted a new dashboard as a methodology of reporting out about COVID issues in the school or how they're handling them. And that's being pretty well received. And probably the last thing is the LEPC spent some time talking about whether we're going to continue meeting on a bi-weekly basis. The LEPC decided probably until this surge ebbs a little more, everybody has a higher level of being comfortable with this. We probably will meet in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks from now, we'll probably take a look at meeting monthly or even less. But Barney, we can probably expect a report again in 2 weeks, if that's okay with the select board, that we will be here again in 2 weeks. So thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another report.
Thank you, Chief. So let's move on, and I'm very happy to introduce, I believe he's on the call, Ken Mostello. Is he?
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, there you are. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Jake.
The chair of the Board of
Bonnie.
Assessors. And Tim,
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to say anything first, but Ken, the floor is yours, unless Tim has any introductory remarks.
Not really. I'll turn things over to Ken. I assisted the Board of Assessors with this recruitment, but really, it's the board's credit that it turned out as well as it did. And I think the full Board of Assessors is on the call.
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
As well. But Ken couldn't introduce them. I guess I've said enough. I'll turn it over to Ken.
Oh, well, thanks, Tim. Yes, with me this evening is Teresa, who is waving there in the top right of my screen, and also David Boardman, who is with us as well. Obviously, this is an important evening for us. We went through a pretty extensive vetting and interviewing process to select a candidate to replace Melissa, and I am pleased to say I think we found an absolutely outstanding candidate. Tim ran some ads to in the publications that municipal employees and assessors read. We got out of that yielded 6 what we thought were qualified candidates. We interviewed 5, and I will say David Boardman went through did the initial vetting process, did phone interviews with the candidates. And David came back to the board and said, I can tell you pretty much they're all qualified. It's going to be a tough call. We went through the interview process, interviewing 5 candidates, as I mentioned, and the result was we felt we could hire any of 4 of the 5. But what it really came down to was Brian McDonald demonstrated what we thought was an absolutely outstanding set of credentials. He has a college degree from Boston University. He is well skilled in IT. He's done statistical analysis. He is currently, and I should point this out, the principal assessor in the town of Stoneham. He has been doing that for many years, was an assistant assessor prior to that. He knows the folks at Patriot Properties intimately. And what really impressed me was he had I think he felt he was really on a mission and wanted to come into town and really help to to really contribute and look for ways to improve the assessment process and identify, frankly, revenue opportunities for the town, which excited me certainly, and I think the other board members as well. So I'm not going to kid you, it was a bit of a tough call, but it was a unanimous decision amongst the three of us to recommend Brian to be interviewed as the finalist. We had agreed with him prior to this that we would select a finalist that he would then vet and interview, and would also have other heads of town departments interview and go through. And I think everything I've heard back from Tim is it sounds like they all felt very good about our decision. So that is how we came to this decision. I am very happy with the selection. I can tell you he presents well. He would be an excellent presenter in front of the appellate board if he needs to go there. I think he will. One of the questions we posed to all the candidates was, let's take a hypothetical situation. You have a taxpayer who comes into town hall. He's upset about something and maybe angry. How are you going to handle the situation? And Brian pretty much came back and said, I'm going to take the time to explain the process and how we arrived at our decision, and hear him out and try to talk through it with him. And that's really what I was looking for. Someone who had the patience to sit down with a taxpayer and hear him out and work with him. So that was how we arrived at our decision. Obviously we are at a point now in the calendar where we are beginning the abatement process. So for us, it's going to be really important to get him on board soon, and then finish the build out of the personnel side of the department. We have another, person we have to think about hiring soon. Anyway, I'm very happy to recommend Brian, and I feel he's a terrific candidate. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And I see that Brian McDonald's on the call, which we're very happy to meet you virtually, Brian. Thank you so much for being here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you to Carlisle? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here this evening. I was very impressed in my initial meeting with the Board of Assessors with their concern and their involvement within the department itself. I found them to be, knowledgeable about the process, the entire assessment process, but I think it's also important to understand that, as an oversight board, they showed the willingness and patience to understand that day-to-day operations would be handled by the principal assessor, whereas they would advise where to go for on a long-term basis. I must also say I was equally impressed when I met with the town hall staff, including Tim. I thought they were all very knowledgeable, and I think there was a lot of commonality in understanding as to what responsibilities would be handled by the assessment department, as well as the finance, and other departments, the accounting department as well. I think there's a real possibility to begin to mold this department in the direction that will bring greater efficiencies. I think that I've been successful at doing in my 15 years here in Stoneham. I have an extensive database background, which is incredibly helpful in automating in different processes for on the administrative side as well as the assessing side that I really think will help be necessary in order to bring the Carlisle department up to speed as soon as possible. I'm excited to begin this opportunity, and I think, you know, when on my initial phone screening with David indicated the extent of basically the complete rebuild of the department, it actually excited me even more. I know a lot of people may shy away from that, but I saw this as a great opportunity to kind of mold this department, much like I have here in Stoneham over the past 15 years. With that said, with regards to Carlisle, my wife and I love the outdoors. We spend a lot of time hiking and camping. I live in Tewksbury, and we do spend a lot of time bringing our dog to walk in various different spots in Carlisle. So this really is a great opportunity to get involved in a community that I've always been so fond of from a distance. And I think this is a great opportunity for me to see it from the inside. So I thank everybody for their consideration, and I look forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Any other members of the select board want to make a comment or ask anything of Brian?
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions for Brian necessarily. I just want to thank, yeah, you know, Ken and the whole board, because yeah, you guys have been just the work that you guys have had to do over the past, well, I was going to say a couple of months, but it's been longer than that. You know, just with the, you know, the difficulties that you guys have faced. You know, I'm glad that you were able to find an individual who, you know, can jump right in, help out, you know, take some of the burden off of you guys, and that everybody, you know, feels comfortable with. So yeah, it seems like it's you know, it's positive all around, and you know, you guys can take a little bit of a breather now, but not really, because it's not this time of year. So but thank you. You know, I mean, I think you guys are, you know, you're one of the boards that flies under the radar, but is so critical to this town. And I don't think, you know, people fully understand and appreciate all that you do. So thank you. And then even the process too, just, you know, making sure and working with Tim that, you know, you got a good number of candidates, you know, you cast a wide net, you know, to have 5 people, excuse me, that, you know, you think are qualified, and 4 that you think, you know, are you know, qualified beyond that level, you know, that we don't always see that in Carlisle. So
Yeah, it was amazing.
yeah, so again, but thank you for, you know, being thorough in that process and taking the time to really work through it and find, you know, a good candidate for Carlisle, because yeah, it's a critical position, right? That always goes, you know, until your tax bill comes, right? Always goes kind of unnoticed, but anyway, so yep, that's it. Sorry.
I wouldn't mind just adding the real unsung hero of the Board of Assessors, frankly, has been Teresa, who has probably been at town hall nearly every day since we lost Melissa. Thank you. I mean, Teresa has done everything humanly possible to try and keep the department running in the absence of having our staff there. So I'm going to give credit where it's due, and Teresa has done just an absolutely magnificent job.
Thank you so much.
Teresa. Yeah, that's really terrific. I think all 3 of you have really stepped up, and Teresa, I appreciate so much your being at town hall, and to all of you, thank you for your tremendous service to the town. Tim, what comes next here? Do we need to take a formal motion, you know, vote of approval, or what
Yes,
is
the board-
motion.
Yeah, there is a motion. The board is, as the appointing authority, you have to more or less ratify the
Okay.
Board of Assessors
All right.
choice.
So I move upon the recommendation of the Carlisle Board of Assessors, the board appoint Brian McDonald of Tewksbury, Mass. As principal assessor for the town of Carlisle, subject to a successful background check and agreement on terms of appointment.
Second,
Thank you. Any more discussion?
What Luke said.
Yeah. Okay, then with no further ado, let's take a roll call vote. Arnold, I.
Oscalillo, I.
Brown eye.
Model I.
Reed, aye.
Good, that's unanimous, Brian. Thank you and welcome.
Yes,
And we
welcome,
look forward to seeing you in the office very soon.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your support, and we're really excited about having Brian on board.
That's wonderful. And thank you again to the Board of Assessors. All righty, well, gosh, we're running a couple minutes ahead. Isn't that great? Let's get to our next item on the agenda, which is a discussion about the pickleball grant agreement and which entails a proposal to build a pickleball facility on the Mosley property. Since we had two different hearings or sessions as part of a select board meeting, one at the end of December and one was our last select board meeting where we heard a lot of input from members of the public. And we also got some additional information from the Recreation Commission. Tonight, we had originally planned to sort of move forward in planning for two votes to be on the April town meeting agenda in the warrant book. But there's been some further reflection about where we are, and I'm going to ask Luke Oscalillo, one of our select board members, to share sort of a new thought, a new plan on that, a proposal.
Thank you. Yeah, so, we have had a couple of the informational sessions and, as we've discussed, with Drew and, and I think, Barney and I spoke the other day. And part of the reason, so I'm the liaison to the RecCom, just so folks know for that clarity. While Drew's done a tremendous job getting information out, trying to really, educate and inform, the community, right? We all have some, hesitation, right? Because ultimately, there's still questions, people are still concerned, people are still not, I don't want to say not up to speed, but not really sure what exactly we're looking at here in terms of, obviously pickleball, right? But in terms of infrastructure, in terms of costs, in terms of, a lot of the details that, I think people really want and need in order to make an informed decision. So I talked with Drew, when was that, last week? I think last week. And, there's still a lot of information, design plans, engineering, a lot of things that, we don't want to rush and ultimately, it's not in the best interest of the town to try to force something through. And it's not necessarily in the best interest of the town to just say, forget it, we're done. Right. So we really want to make sure that the town has, all the information that they feel that they need. That the planning board has time to review, and make sure that they have the information that they need. But at the end of the day, that really everybody has the information that they need to make an informed decision, whether it be pro or against, right? And so after a long discussion, I think we started tossing around this idea of maybe April is too soon, and the idea of postponing it and potentially having a special town meeting in the fall. We've had special town meetings for other things, and obviously this wouldn't most likely be the only thing on the agenda. But really, just give people a chance to weigh in more, give, the RecCom, the ability to really answer a lot of those questions that are still circulating, address some of the information and misinformation that goes around with every sort of project that happens. And just, also take some of the feedback that we've received from the community, just to make sure that, that we're doing this thoroughly and properly. It's a big decision for Carlisle, right? I mean, it's, we don't always get stuff like this, and we want to make sure we get it right. So that's kind of the, I guess the idea in a nutshell would be to, continue with the process, gather more information, have, RecCom pull more information together, have more informational sessions, more joint informational sessions, more community informational sessions. So really, the information is out there, and people feel comfortable with whichever way they decide to go. So sorry, maybe a bit wordy, but
That was great. So for the select board members, the question is whether we think that makes sense to, instead of having both the specific grant agreement requirement about the enterprise fund, but then separately a binding warrant article about whether or not the town supports the pickleball facility, taking those two things that were planned for the April town meeting, those two warrant articles, and moving them to a fall town meeting.
I have a quick question, and that was that in the grant agreement, as I recall, and I didn't reread it for this, but I thought there was some language that, there was some deadline that they really needed the information by the April town meeting. So how does that affect, if we move it to the fall town meeting, how does that affect the grant agreement?
We have on the call with us tonight, Tom Harrington of Town Council, as well as Drew McMorrow, the chair of the RecCom, and Holly Mansfield is also with us tonight. Hi, Holly. I don't know, Tom, do you want to respond to that? Or Drew, do you want to respond on what the grant agreement requires in terms of timing?
So Tom Harrington, Town Council. Hello, everybody. I can tell you that, yeah, we would have to amend the grant agreement to push it out past spring town meeting, because right now the grant agreement is drafted as if votes would be taken at the annual town meeting.
So my follow-up question is, has the Steinberg Lally Charitable Foundation been approached, and would they be willing to do this or not?
I would
I don't
look to
know.
Drew for that answer.
Yeah, I have not apprised them of that at this point.
So if our decision could potentially upend your, wherever you are with them.
Well, maybe the way to think about this is that we would, if generally we're supportive of the idea, that we would, tentatively say, yes, we're ready to do that, pending a conversation with the foundation to see if it's acceptable to them. And if it's not, then we come back at our next meeting and say, all right, then where are we now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I completely support moving it to the fall, because, a lot of the comments have been about, oh, it's going too fast. I think Drew's done an awesome job. But I think that, just giving it more time for people to speak up is a great idea. I think we will also, I don't think this is going to be the only thing on the fall town meeting. I think that we have other committees that we put together where we really haven't given them a lot of time. And so, perhaps something like the Public Safety Building Committee might need to, be coming to town meeting for some funds for, consulting or something, or there might be other things that will be a sigh of relief to some other committees, that they know that they have another stab halfway through the year and they don't have to wait until spring. So I think that there's multiple reasons why this is a good idea, in my opinion.
Any other members of the board want to comment? Well, really, it's just David. Sorry.
I support it. I definitely support it. I would recommend that there be, and I've heard a lot of comments as everybody else has, and I think rather than have, we've got people on the outside making comments, we've got different boards. The COA met today. They had a whole pile of comments. They actually came up with a pretty good idea, which was maybe we should have a single, I hate to ask for more task force, but maybe there should be a single multi-discipline group. It could be private citizens and representatives of some of the boards, FinCom, Select Board, COA, maybe school committee, I don't know, where we can get the list of questions, like a single list. Because there's an awful lot of things. Well, what about this? And did you think about this? And da, 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 da. Yeah, okay, those are all valid, but they're all coming like shrapnel, right? So I think we ought to take the opportunity of that extra time gives us, if presumably the foundation agrees, to be more methodical about gathering questions, getting answers to those questions and having those addressed, rather than poor Drew is like, it just seems like we were running a disjointed process at this point. And we as a town, if we should decide whether we support it or not, we should be more orderly in our analysis of it. That's my opinion.
All right, so I'm hearing support from the select board to move this to a fall town meeting. And in addition, that we would like the Recreation Commission, Drew, to have a conversation with the foundation to determine if that will be acceptable to them, and in which case then we rewrite the grant agreement as Tom Harrington has suggested. So for now, I think we just want a motion to move these two warrant articles to a fall town meeting.
I kind of would, okay, I'm not quite asked. I'm not ready to, I would not be ready to make motions about what the articles would look like in a fall town meeting. I think we wanted, personally, I would rather do this more serially. Let's find out if we are having, if this is moving to a fall town meeting first. I mean, I think you were right. This board supports, moving this whole thing to a fall town meeting, but if the donor is not doesn't accept this, we don't need these articles at all. So I don't see why we would do that tonight.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I didn't mean we actually vote on the two specific articles in the packet, but more the concept of moving them to the fall. But I don't have any problem with saying let's come back at the next select board meeting and see what the response is from the foundation. And if we've gotten a positive response, we can then take a more formal vote. Are other members of the select board comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the sense is it should be a fall meeting,
Yeah.
but let's give it more time. There's no reason why we need to vote now.
Right.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Any other matters regarding this that we need to address tonight? Or because we're planning at 7:45 to have a conversation with Madeline and John, but I see John is on the call and Madeline is too. So we could go ahead and move to that agenda item if the rest of the members of the board are ready to move on. We good? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Luke, and Tom Harrington. Thanks very much for being here again tonight. Drew and Holly, we appreciate you all being here too. Thanks a lot. All righty. So tonight, what we want to do with in our discussion about the master plan presentation is sort of get our ducks in order as the two boards, the planning board and the select board, as we prepare for the conversation that we're going to have, the meeting that we're going to have next Tuesday, February 1st, which is an additional meeting for us and for the planning board that is solely for the purpose of hearing from the master plan steering committee, having their presentation about what's in the final draft of a master plan for Carlisle. So Madeline and I talked about using this time tonight to talk about how that would work out and sort of how the meeting will go and expectations, and then also to hear a little bit from the planning board, from John Mativier, who's been doing a yeoman's job, I understand, filling in as a planning administrator, about just thoughts about where the planning board is, going forward in terms of staffing. So with that, I'd say welcome, Madeline, welcome, John. And Madeline, I'll turn it over to you as the person who, you'll be chairing this, the joint meeting next week. So what are you thinking about how that will go?
Thank you, Barney. Thank you, everyone, for having us here this evening. I had approached Barney, a month or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, with a suggestion to have this joint meeting so that we could come up with a way to have a lot of focus and kind of appropriate emphasis on the culmination of this long project. I think this project started, I think it's 5 years ago. It was before I came to the planning board. So it's been a long time. And it's very exciting that they're wrapping up and anticipating having a draft report 2 days from now. The structure of this meeting, it will be a joint meeting of the planning board and the select board, and the master plan committee will be attending, and they will be making a presentation. They anticipate 20 to 30 minutes in which they'll hit the highlights about the report and kind of a summary of it. Also at that meeting, there would be an opportunity for our two boards to offer preliminary comments and feedback and questions. We're tentatively thinking that we would not take comments from the general public at that point. First of all, the public wouldn't have seen the report yet, and it might turn into an unwieldy meeting with two boards worth of people who might have questions or comments. But the meeting next Tuesday on February 1st would kick off the process of soliciting and obtaining feedback on the report. I believe the Master Plan Steering Committee is anticipating a period of 30 to 45 days in which the report will be made available to the public, and there'll be multiple ways for them to provide input. And there's an ongoing effort right now to get input from the boards and committees on the specific recommendations and implementation table. And that process, I think, also will go on for the next 30 to 45 days. There's one thing I want to highlight for you guys in particular. The Master Plan Steering Committee anticipates getting you a draft copy of the text of the report this coming Thursday, so in 2 days. And it's a little funny to say final draft text, but when this thing is published, it's still a draft because we have the comment period coming up. But the text that's going to go into that published version is final, or it will be on Thursday. There'll still be formatting to do. There's photos being inserted and graphics and the like. They would come to our meeting, use slides to show us the highlights, and then anticipate publishing the final report, the final draft report with the pictures and the formatting by the end of the week. We don't anticipate at this point that we'd have the slides ahead of time, and I hope that doesn't interfere with anyone's ability to kind of be a full participant in this. But these guys, they have a slug of work trying to coordinate all of this. And I think it'll be great that we're going to get the report, a couple of days ahead of time. For the planning board, what we're anticipating doing, although it's a little bit up in the air still, it's a work in progress. We are tentatively going to have a meeting on March 14th. And at that meeting, the planning board members would have the opportunity to offer comments, and we would vote at that point to accept or not the report. If planning board members have extensive comments, conceivably we could have another meeting on March 28th. But that's roughly our time frame, and it would give us an opportunity to get a sense of what the comments coming in from the public are, as well as our own thoughts. And I've really emphasized to the planning board, and I'll kind of make a, I guess this is my big ask, a plea to you. We really want your thoughtful comments. I mean, we're not giving this to you with 2 days to read it because we want a rubber stamp. I mean, we're trying to design a process that allows a lot of time to think about this and to give input, because we really think that gives it the best chance of being successful. So your further process, whether you want the whole planning board to come back and meet with you again, or you want to have your own meeting to offer comments, or really whatever you think would work well for you, that's still a piece to be decided. And there's just two topics that on February 1st, after we receive the presentation, that we might want to think about talking about. And one of them is next steps, which is, that'll probably be pretty straightforward. I think the master plan is going to be able to run through with us what they recommend. And the other topic is implementation. If any of you have had a chance to look at the recommendations in the implementation table, some of the recommendations are themselves about how the whole thing will be implemented. And right now there's a draft recommendation in there that the select board would assume responsibility for that. That's on the table to discuss. Certainly the planning board is willing to do its piece here. We're not trying to shirk the responsibility or the work, but in thinking about this, particularly the types of recommendations that are in this report, you guys really sit at the combination of all those areas. They all come together in areas that you oversee. And it seems like you're in the best position as we assign priorities, decide where money will and won't be spent, that you guys should have some role in this. But I'm just putting it out there for you to think about. You don't have to answer me tonight, but give some thought between now and February 1st about how you might like that to work. The planning board we're really flexible to do it ourselves, do it as partners with you. So before we turn to planning or to the planning board staffing, which is kind of a related topic, I asked Barney if I could mention it tonight, because one of the recommendations in the master plan report, I believe, is that we hire a planner. And conversely, if we did hire a planner, that person would probably work on implementation. So it seemed like the two topics fit together, and it might be good to just give you guys an update on that. Before we turn to that, does anyone have any questions, or is there anything about the way this meeting is being set up that you'd like us to change?
Well, I know you've given it a lot of thought, Madeline, and I really appreciate that. I want to just add one other thing, which is in the recommendations, there's a piece about having an implementation, figuring out how to manage the implementation, and that it may be that we end up with an implementation committee of some sort, but that's going to be depending on where the select board comes down on taking overall responsibility, that group would be working with some town hall staff to make sure the project gets, the various proposals get implemented. Any comments though, or questions from other select board members?
I do. Thank you, Madeline, as always, for working through all these things. So a comment and then a question. So the comment is, it's great that we are getting the materials on Thursday before, but whenever the presentation's available, even if it's the morning of the meeting, advance is better. So we can at least read through it and not have to process reading the presentation in real time. So, as I tell everybody, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, anytime you have that presentation ready, please send it to Jen so that we can get at least a couple hours head start on reading it, so we're efficient.
I'll do what I can.
Okay, thank you. The question is, I'm a little murky. You said the planning board's going to vote to approve it in March. Is that an up or down vote kind of thing, or is that the result of the iterations that are going to occur between now and then?
Cool. I've thought about that a lot, David, and I don't know if I have a completely concrete answer for you. It was a topic of discussion at the planning board at our last meeting. Someone said, what if there's something I disagree with? Does that mean I vote no?
Right.
And I think every person has to think about this and approach it. I think there are a variety of alternatives. And to answer your basic question, yes, we're going to vote it up or down. And I don't anticipate that the planning board is going to reject this, because we've been having presentations on it for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I do anticipate and hope that we will be offering comments on it. And it's possible that there's some comment that someone has that's so pervasive throughout the thing that they just can't support it. I hope we're not at that point. One way to look at it is that it's a process that yielded recommendations. And if folks are comfortable with the process, or think that it was basically a process that solicited a lot of public feedback and did analysis, you don't necessarily have to agree with every single thing that's in there. And a lot of them, pertain to a specific committee or board, and we're seeking input from those committees or boards. And for a lot of the recommendations, I think someone in the planning board's position or the select board's position, it's appropriate to defer to them if they think it's a priority to spend time on or not. But there could be things in there that you don't agree with, or you think the process doesn't support. And at that point, I think you have options to try to persuade people that it should be changed, offer that as a comment. Perhaps you could vote yes with a statement, I support this except this one thing I just have to tell you I don't support. I think there's a range of options available to you. And I think it's helpful to think of this as an ongoing process. There's not too many things in here that are just, we're going to wave a wand and they're going to happen. A lot of it is additional study and working on things. And there's additional time as people start to work on these to flesh them out and decide, should we actually take that to town meeting, or should the select board approve that? So I don't know if that answers, it's a little bit
Well,
rambling.
it sort of does. I guess it gets to, back to a process question. So a week from today, we're going to see it, I guess, for the first time and at the select board level and begin a process where we comment and you comment. And then again, from February 1 to March 14 is 6 weeks-ish. Are you going to have hearings? Are you going to, I guess, from a general process standpoint, are there going to be iterative feedback loops that occur as a result of this report that may result in some tweaking of the report before you do the up or down vote?
I would anticipate yes.
Okay. Okay, I think that's fine. And then, as you said, or maybe Barney said, implementation is a whole separate chapter, right? So the report is a report. This is what we recommend, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's for the boards to take up, the implementation actions and the priorities, I guess,
Yes.
is what I'm hearing, right? Okay, okay.
And
Okay.
just one thing I'd remind myself about this is that this is an effort to try to provide, overall guidance and kind of, a framework for where we think Carlisle wants to go over the next, 5 to 10 years. And it's not, and so it's not going to be a static document. The hope would be it provides that framework and set of guidelines and set of values that then we use and other boards and members in the community uses to help us in making decisions going forward, with the understanding that conditions are going to change, and so it may be we're going to do some updating of certain parts of the master plan over the next couple of years based on that. So I think from my standpoint as the chair of the select board, I'm looking at this document as, do I think overall it's a good representation of where we are today as a community, what we care about as a community, and then where in broad strokes we want to go as a community. Any other comments or questions from board members?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
As you know, my nose has been in it for
Yes.
quite a while.
Yeah, just full disclosure, both Kate and I have been members of the Master Plan Steering Committee, so yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well then, that's great, Madeline. I'm certainly looking forward to this, and I'm glad we're doing it as a joint meeting. I think that was a really smart move.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's move over to the other discussion about sort of planning board staffing and your thoughts about that going forward.
Well, I'm sure you all know that we lost our longtime planning administrator, George Mansfield, last June. He retired, and you probably also are all aware that John agreed to work with us as interim planning administrator. And the first thing I would like to do is to give John an opportunity, or to have you guys hear from him about what he's been working on in the planning board, what he's been, finding But before I turn it over to John, I want to take this opportunity again to thank him publicly, because it's been so great for us to be able to work with him. It gave us the opportunity to have an interim period where we could kind of try to think where we want to go next and not have to rush into anything. And it's been a great learning experience with the synergies between building and planning. But anyway, John.
Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate that. Let me start by saying I am not a town planner, and but I'm pretty good with some of the process stuff. And what I've been working on mostly is trying to understand and clean up the processes and why Carlisle is, the planning department is doing things. I think the good part of not being a town planner is, I see certain things, why are we doing it this way? Is it Mass General Law? Is it regulations? Or is it just legacy? And a lot of it is just legacy. So the majority of my time to date has been working on going through the files, cleaning up the files, and we started scanning files. So we'll have all the planning board files offered electronically, and the planning board will have to decide what they want viewable to the public, it's all public record, but how easily accessible this information should be. So it's going to be similar to the building department's database, and we'll be able to access records a lot quicker, easier. That's one thing during COVID, which was very hard for me, because all the other departments, as the building commissioner, all the other departments I worked with were still all stuck in paper, and with nobody in town hall to actually access that file, things, got pushed out longer or farther than they had to get pushed out. I'm going to jump back to, Madeline, I'm going to tell you what I think the town
Go
planner
for it.
should be.
Yeah.
Okay. So I met with Brian, the new town, the assessor, the other day. He's got some strengths that, we are currently as a town completely deficient in. So a lot of the things that I was looking at that this next town planner really should have, I see Brian has quite a few of them. So that's really encouraging for me. When they, right now the planning department, schedule wise, master plans taking up a lot of the planning department's time, but there aren't a whole lot of big projects coming down the pike right now. So we're able to administratively move along pretty well. But going forward, this position, you're going to need somebody who can execute the implementation table of that master plan. If you look at that, you'll get to see it on February 1st, or you can see it now, but you'll be more familiar with it on February 1st. There's a lot of work that's going to be done by all the boards, but planning really, I think, bears the brunt of it. GIS, we have GIS-ish in Carlisle. We don't use it. We don't really take advantage of that technology. I've been working with Madeline to try to, we have some funds that were set aside by town meeting years ago, and try to use those funds to get our current GIS database up to date, and hopefully move it forward so it becomes a useful tool to the town of Carlisle. And the other huge, so since I've been here, my building department hat on, the Carlisle's zoning bylaw needs an extensive review. It's missing, there's so many sections that use a word verbiage, but it's never defined in the definitions. Floor area, how do I calculate it as a building commissioner? It doesn't say how to do it. So it's up to me to look at how John Luther did it, how Bob Koenig did it, and those two were different. So, there's so much it needs to be done on that front as well.
Thank you. you guys may have questions for John, but I thought I'd just add on the end an update on the process that we're going through. I have to say, I was listening to the presentation by the Board of Assessors, feeling very jealous because they're at the end of it and they got a good person. We formed a subcommittee early last fall. It's Ed Rolfe, Addie Grady, and PEL. And they did quite a bit of work and came out with a preliminary decision to recommend a planner. And we kind of paused that process in the meantime, twisting John's arm to keep working with us a while longer. We really want to hear the results of the governance committee and the master plan recommendations. And when those efforts are finished and we get their reports, we're going to get our subcommittee going again with the goal of having a recommendation, by the May-June timeframe. One of the things I want to ask you tonight, though, is to feel free to give us your input, and we'd like your input, even before we get to you with the point of a formal recommendation. One of the things that's happened as we've gone along this year, I think, whether it's because we've pursued efficiencies or because there's kind of a gradual decrease in the number of projects over time, we don't probably need the entire 58 hours that we had to carry out our main core function of processing our special permits and our site plans and those types of things. So some of that time is freed up and it can be devoted to another purpose that should be a purpose. It's beyond the planning board. It should reflect the priorities of the town, whether that's a planner or whether it's some kind of land use director or combining with other land use departments and going in that direction, or both. So we really would appreciate feedback, and we'll incorporate that as best we can, and then look forward kind of later in the spring to being back with a proposal.
I just want to say thank you for all the work you guys have done around that, and for the thoughtfulness and the effort and energy that you've put into looking at all that, and it's appreciated.
Thanks.
Yeah, and John, I'll just say that nothing like getting in there, right, with some understanding of how it could be and seeing, what needs to be done. So I really appreciate your insights, and also just very concrete what needs to happen, to improve the way it all works. And I'm excited too that you feel that there's some good, there'll be the relationship between the new chief principal assessor and your role and future planner, or whatever the position is. I mean, I think that's a huge addition, to what we need at town hall. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, I want to
They
echo
really did a good job.
what Barney said. I totally echo. I think, we sat down, I think it's a little more than a year ago now, with the attempt to get the land use boards to talk to each other about mutual goals, and getting you to help the planning board has been great. Sounds like getting the new assessor with his IT skills is going to be great. Reminding everyone that we're getting a new town manager, probably a new assistant town manager. And we're going to have the recommendations of the master planning committee. We're going to have the recommendations of the governance committee. So there's a lot of things that are coming together. Kate and others have worked very hard on sort of retooling the HR side. So we have a lot of pieces coming together, and I want to make sure, maybe this is directed more towards Madeline, that we shouldn't be in a rush to spec the town planner job. There's no doubt we need a planner. There's so much going on. But the nature of the role, the way we're merging the boards and their cross-functionality, the objectives that we consider priorities in the town, let's make sure we let that kind of come together. And that will help us, I think, specify, better the kind of role we want that planner to play.
I agree
Thank
with
you.
you. We're trying to do that, but, and I know you're aware, but there is a balance between the longer we put it off, there's the day-to-day stuff that.
Oh,
can
there's
be
always
more
this thing
challenging.
called interim, okay, but I just want to say, I mean, we're at a really important point in the town's, I don't know. We're at an important point where there's a lot of macro and micro trends that are coming together. Let me just say it that way. So I think, as I said, the town administrator is going to come in, a town administrator will come in with a vision, and the master planning has worked very hard to create a vision. Governance is looking at a vision. We're looking at the way land use boards cooperate. New technology is coming in, new people are coming in. So I just, to be sensitive to that, and, you know, we want to help. We want to make sure the work gets done. So I don't know. I don't want to take any further than that. And I definitely want to thank you and John and everyone else for, you know, working hard through this. It's been, you know, without George, I know there's been a lot that's been put on your plate. So thank you. And that's my advice.
Thank you.
Any other comments from board members?
I just like John to reconsider taking on a more expanded role, but if he won't, then that's fine, but I just like him to reconsider. No. Yeah, no, thanks, John. I mean, you know, it just, in addition to this, just everything that you've done since you've come aboard. I mean, it's, you know, we're really lucky to have you in town hall, and yeah, thank you for just stepping in here. It was, yeah, you know, a big ask, so thank you, you know.
Yeah, I know the whole board feels that way. Nathan, any comment or question?
For once, I don't.
Woo! Wow, John, you've got some magic there.
Yeah, Jen, put that in the minutes.
Right. Well, we know this is just, you know, in terms of discussion about what happens at the, you know, for staffing for the planning board and the other work we're discussing. We know this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So we're really glad we've had the opportunity tonight to, you know, talk together about it. And we want to keep that up. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much. And I'll look forward to, John and I will both see you next Tuesday night.
All right. Great.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Well, you know, this is feeling very kind of upbeat, isn't it? Feeling good. That we got some good things to look forward to. So the next item on our agenda, and we're a little early. Let's see, I thought I saw Christine. Yeah, there's Christine and there's Tom. So I see some members of the transfer station task force on the call. Christine Lear, the chair, and Tom Bellata, one of the members. And I thought I saw John Lavery earlier, but don't see his name up there now. But anyway, welcome back.
He's still there. He's the dark box with no name.
Right, I should have known. Oh no, Big Mac, aren't you? Isn't Big Mac John? I can't remember. Anyway.
John is John. He's got the black box with no name in the middle.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Anyway, thank you, task force. Welcome back. And so for this part of the meeting, we just as a recap, so 2 weeks ago, we heard a very thorough report from the task force that we had charged as the select board back, you know, in the spring of last year to come forward with some recommendations about the transfer station. So we heard that report 2 weeks ago. We, I think we're all generally impressed and appreciative and favorable, felt very favorably toward the report. And one of the requests was that the transfer station task force come back with a specific motion for the select board. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Tom. There is a motion in your packet that Christine and Tom and I had a little role in crafting. But I want to turn it over to Christine as chair to give an introduction to that.
Thank you, Barney. Before I do that, we decided that rather than convene the whole committee task force to bring together again to write this motion, we would just have a couple of us write the motion, and you were part of it because you're on the select board and it was for you guys. And so I sent out the motion tonight to the rest of the select board, to the rest of the task force, to let them know that this is what we were submitting to represent our recommendations. And there's some concern about what is actually in the recommendation. So I'm wondering, can you put
In the motion or?
the
in
motion, I'm sorry.
motion?
Can you
Okay,
put the motion up so that John Lavery had some concern that it was sounding like we were going to discourage people from bringing things to the transfer station, trying to get them to their behavior to change prior to using the transfer station. And that is not what we agreed to. So I would just like John to feel comfortable, or maybe if we can't get to comfort with the motion, can we move it to the next meeting?
Hmm.
Because I thought, I didn't think we needed to bring it to the task force, but at this stage of the game, this is the last place I want to undercut my peers.
Right. And I would also, I just, not, I heard late last week or this weekend from Gary and Chris, and I would like to just also give their input as well at this meeting, if I could.
Well, shall we take a look at the motion first?
Yeah, and I'd love John Lavery to.
Yep, and there he is. Hi, John.
Hey, check it out. So I have a camera.
Yeah, well, hang on
Yay.
1 second. Yeah, look at you. Tim, are you able to share the motion?
I think I can.
I'm hoping
Hang
I
on a
sent the
second.
wrong one out, Barney.
Sorry, I'm not used to being on camera. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know if there's a way, Tim, to take off the
I can move it
Yeah,
up.
display at
Scroll
the
it up.
top. Oh, you
Yeah.
can't, okay, there you
That's-
go.
Scroll.
That doesn't quite get it all, but that's pretty
Oh,
close.
my camera. Right.
Maybe make it a little less than 100%, and then you can get the whole thing on because it's fairly large.
Yeah,
All right. Where's
Down
that?
bottom right, a little further right.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna have to get rid of the camera in a second.
There you go. That,
There
okay,
you go. Can people see that?
yeah.
you can go a
Okay.
little larger.
Yeah, it's a little small now.
Oh, that's
Perfect.
Good
good.
news, John, this is not the one I sent you. So John Lavery, read this one because this
Which
is not the
John?
one.
Oh, there's another one?
This is the one, I thought that this was the one that was final, and the one I sent you was final, and it's not the same as the one that Barney has, so see if the one that Barney or that Tim is showing us makes you feel comfortable.
I'm not sure I can respond in a moment, but let me.
Okay, well then,
Well, just
Um,
while you're looking at it, let me just comment that it's written so that the motion that the select board would entertain tonight, if we go ahead with this, is just the first 4 lines. Which is 1, the motion says to accept the recommendations of the task force as outlined in the final report that we heard 2 weeks ago. And second, that the select board agrees to establish the Transfer Station Action Committee to implement the recommendations. And then the stuff below it is just to give a little bit of detail on sort of the key initiatives that were in the report. But the select board wouldn't actually be voting up or down on those specific initiatives. But it was David Modell who asked for a specific motion. And so this was an attempt to both give a little detail, but make the motion itself broader, which is what the
Got
4
it.
lines at the
Got
top.
it. So
try to
Barney,
do.
could I respond or should I wait for my turn?
Sure, no, go right ahead.
Okay, so if the motion, which I believe that you would make or Mr. Modell or someone on the board
Correct,
is the first 4 lines,
yes.
I'm totally in support. I think we could go ahead. But I would obviously be waiting to hear Nathan's concerns from Chris and Gary, who I'm very aware have been watching this and want to make sure they're included. So Nathan brought that up, but if the
Yeah.
motion is as you've put forward, fine, totally on board, supported 100%. We'll back it. We'll argue it,
Good.
arm wrestle, and etc.
thanks,
Excellent.
John.
Excellent. Well, then let's hear, maybe we should put the motion on the floor then. And then Nathan, when we do the discussion part, you can make your comments. Does that work?
I'd prefer to make my comments ahead of time.
First,
if I may.
okay, sure, go for it.
So, what I'm saying, I just want to say in no way diminishes my comments about the outstanding work that, I've been saying this committee has done. It truly is amazing. And I hope you all choose to stay on the combined task force. I did get a call, I believe it was over this past weekend. I'm sorry, I did not have a chance to reach out to the committee about a particular concern, and you're probably not surprised about it. It is the C&D disposal. They are very concerned that there will be an increase in the usage because it will be mentioned at the permit time, and they're concerned that a couple things about that. One is that it means it will be used more, which means they'll have to haul it more, which means there'll be more wear and tear on their trucks, and it means that there will be more staff involved. What they would like to talk to you about is the possibility of, rather than going through the permitting process, that they be given, an iPhone with a credit card reader, and they be able to just place the charges right there as people come in. I pushed them on that, and I said, "Are you really going to enforce that?" And they said, absolutely, they will enforce that if that means that they can get this changed, that they will make sure that anybody dumping in the dumpster will be charged. Any commercial would be charged. So that is their request, is that that rather than a 1 year going through the permit, maybe it's a 1 year going through the credit card. And if that's not making the changes we want, then we can try something else.
Christine or Tom, do you
Well,
want to respond?
Yeah,
on
I
that?
would love Tom or John Lavery actually did the legwork on this. And as a contractor, he understands this dumpster better than anyone. So John Lavery, do you have a feedback to that?
I do. Nathan, I took exactly what you just professed to the transfer station task force more than once, I believe, as what Gary and the team at the DPW wanted, and it was rejected. So the proposal that's in place now is the second one that I came up with as a solution. I've known all along that that's what Gary wanted, and I proposed it early on. Gary, in the few meetings that he attended, proposed it, and it was rejected by the transfer station task force. So I don't think that I have any, there's not much more I can do at this point. I went with the transfer station task force recommendations and tried to find the next best solution. So now we're back at square one.
So what were the reasonings behind the rejection of your recommendation and Gary and Chris's recommendation?
You would have to ask the rest of the task force.
Yeah, Tom Bellotta probably can weigh in on that part. Tom, are you here?
Sure, a couple things. In terms of our recommendations, number one, we want it to be free for residents, non-commercial use. And that's what I view as the most important point. John represented and indicated that we ought to do something for the contractor side. And at least when I spoke to Gary, the idea of having credit card responsibility and ownership there did also involve some additional staff and issues. My perspective on this is we obviously, if you look at the last point here in the motion, work with the DPW building department to conduct a 1 year trial program. We could perhaps make that language more general. We obviously don't want to do anything that Gary and the DPW are uncomfortable with. We're trying here to obtain some revenue from commercial or permitted use. That's what we're trying to do. The number of revenue we're talking about is pretty small. I think it's 2 to 5K perhaps. And in any case, most members don't really want to increase the amount of C&D. Some might be open to that. I personally am not. So if what we were to do in this trial was to increase C&D, I'd want to change course. So my sense on this would be if Gary's really not on board on this, we should leave it as an open item to be worked out. But we should definitely go ahead with the part which had a lot of support, which is not charging residents for dumping C&D. non-commercial use.
Yeah, and I oh, wait, am I on mute? No. Just to be clear, they weren't suggesting that they were charging for all dumping of C and D. It was commercial use only that they would charge for.
Right. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that. If Gary doesn't like this 1-year trial, we should work something different. I mean, we should see if we can do it some other way. It's
Yeah.
not significant enough to cause a major problem.
I totally concur. I don't think the goal here is not to be dead right, you know? The goal is to be collaborative and to try to see what we can do to be more efficient and more thoughtful at the transfer station. So part of that is working with the people that know more about it than anybody, and that's Gary and his crew. So I think Tom's right and John's right. We should leave this as an open item and discuss it with the DPW and then move from there, from the committee that follows this, if that's where we go.
Yeah, and so, in the full report that the task force presented a couple of weeks ago, there was a section that was basically sort of open items to be discussed by the follow-up committee, the Transfer Station Action Committee. And so I think one thing we could do is just remove, this isn't part of the motion anyway, but I think we could agree, I think the task force would agree that we take that item about the C&D permitting and cost and put that underneath the open items that the implementation committee will work out with the DPW, and we can change it to be something that works for the DPW staff.
Yeah, so I guess, Tim, does that mean that we just modify this motion and at the end implement the recommendations with the exception of further work to be done on the C&D component?
Yeah, that's correct, Nathan. Yep.
Okay.
You can modify it.
Can I just add a quick comment?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, it's, so I mean, I brought this up the last time as well, just, the concern about, the permit piece and all of that. No, I mean, I guess it came from Gary and Chris, but I actually agree. Oops, am I echoing? I actually like that idea with the credit card piece, but also too, it gives them the ability to monitor it better, right? And say yes and no, right? Because that was my concern, right? What if somebody comes with, roof shingles, and John, I know you said that those aren't allowed, right? But you're going to get somebody that's going to sneak them underneath, right? So yeah, it's, it gives the guys the opportunity to say no, right? If they see a load that they don't like, see ya, right? And then it avoids that conflict of, well, I paid my fee and I deserve to dump here. So yeah, anything that'll avoid confrontation, I think, is a positive.
Yeah, it would, if we decided to go the credit card route, it would mean that we have an additional sign we want you to create, which is contractors, please bring a credit card.
Yeah, right. Right. Okay, well, so let's, Nathan, do you want to take a crack at moving this motion with the amendment that you suggested?
Sure, I can give it a try, see what everybody thinks. I move that the Carlisle Select Board accept the recommendations of the Transfer Task Force as outlined in their final report presented to the Carlisle Select Board on January 11th, 2022, and 2, agree to establish a Transfer Station Action Committee to implement the recommendations with the exception of the section on C&D where further discussion will be had with the DPW.
Do I hear
Second.
a second?
Second.
Luke has seconded it. Thank you. Any more conversation or discussion?
Did I catch that okay for everybody?
Yeah, that was good.
Seems good to me. Okay, well then let's take a
Wait,
vote.
I have, are we in the conversation part? Sorry.
You just barely made it, David, and we're running
I
out of
just made
time, so make it brief.
We're running out of time. We're way ahead. What are you talking about right
No,
now?
we're not. 8:20 is the police chief.
Okay. Don't want to keep the chief waiting. So
Don't make
the
him
same
mad.
thing, I posed the question to you in an email, but I didn't hear an answer. So I'm okay with the motion, but the follow-on is to create this TSAC. And then there's a whole pile of things they have to do. So I have really, they're budgetary questions. it's not clear to me who's to do what, like signage and
That's
community
outlined in the,
education.
yeah.
Amy, can you see what's going on down there, please?
It's
There's a
all in
lot
the-
of things in there, and I don't see any dollars tagged to that either for the DPW budget or some separate budget that the TSAC would need.
Well, the committee reported on that 2 weeks ago. It's in the report, David, that the things that are being recommended that involve an extra cost are going to be able to come out of the sticker fund because they are related to recycling. And the other changes that involve, for instance, moving the swap shop are something that Gary feels he could cover within his existing budget. So there is no, there are no additional funds needed to implement the changes.
I think that there was, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have it in front of me. I think there was an additional $15,000 cost. Is that right for one of the items?
I think
Is
the
that right?
slab of concrete,
Yeah, there was,
Might
I
have-
think there was one cost that was outside of everything that was covered.
No, I thought Gary, didn't we determine that Gary believe, Tom, you probably had the most recent conversation.
The cost that Gary determined was outside the sticker fund was replacement of the two compactor sheds. Not the swap shed, the two compactor sheds that he believes need repair. And he said he could cover that with his budget.
Oh, so there was no
Everything else
increase
is
in
fine.
budget. There was no increase in budget at all. I thought we were okaying an additional 15,000.
Not according, Gary said he thought
Okay.
everything else was under recycling. Now, there is an issue with the sticker fund, which is the sticker fund, was depleted at the end of last year and absorbs about 50K from the new sticker purchases in January, February. So it'll be fine, over the next 6 months. But these expenses, depending upon what happens to the sticker fund, may result in a negative balance of that sticker fund in the second half of the year. That's certainly possible.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that the removal of the oil tank is going to be a 6-figure issue. And that is not in the transfer station task force budget or action committee budget. It's in the DPW budget, but it has not been put forward. There are issues there.
Right, but not part of this report at all.
No.
I do not think so, only in
Yeah.
that it's referenced in there.
Right.
Nathan.
Okay.
Gary believes that will ultimately be covered by the sticker fund. If you look at what's happened to the sticker fund the last 2-3 years, there've been inflows and outflows of $100,000 for waste cleanup. I guess the last penalty on the oil tank thing was paid out of the sticker fund. It went through the sticker fund somehow. How that happens, I don't know, but it did.
I don't believe by town bylaw, Tom, that's actually allowed. I could be wrong. But
I can tell you, I got from Jen Gibbons the actual flow of money, and $113,000 was paid out of the
Okay.
sticker fund last year.
Yeah. Anyway, we're digressing a little bit from
Yep,
this
that's why I stopped.
motion. So why don't we come back to this? Any other last comments that are new ones? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. So I would like a roll call vote. And I will begin, since I'm the first one in the alphabet, by last name. Arnold, I.
Basculillo, aye.
Brown eye?
Model I.
Reed, aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. And thank you, Transfer Station Task Force members. And we look forward to the newly assembled Transfer Station Action Committee and hope that we as a select board have the job of coming up with the language for that committee. But we'll look to you guys for some help on that. And hopefully we'll get that set up soon. And you can present the names of folks that have indicated they'd like to be part of that. So thank you. All right. Let's move on to the next part of our agenda, and that we have Chief Fisher here with us again. Thank you, Chief. And I don't know if Victor's on the call. Yes, he is. Hi, Victor, from the Finance Committee. He's the liaison to the Police Department, and Kate is the liaison for the Select Board to the Police Department. So this is a follow-up to the discussion we had 2 weeks ago with the Chief and Victor, in which they were going to host a couple of planning sessions with a selected group representing the police department. And we're here to hear sort of how those went and what the proposal is going forward. So I'll turn it over to you, Chief. And again, Tim, if you're able to put the chief's slides up on the screen for us to look at together, that would be great. Welcome back, Chief Fisher.
Thank you very much. I don't know. I mean, I can also share my screen. I have them, but they might not come up.
You want to,
the
Tim,
good
if you
format
want to
that Tim's
just,
would.
yeah. Where is Tim still on? Oh, there he is.
I'm still here, but if you have them handy, Chief, it might take me a minute to pull them up.
So will you allow me to share my screen?
You should be able to share your screen.
And I have not done this in a while, so there it is. Let's try that. And see how that works. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So I repeated the first few slides just to remind everybody, you know, what we're asking for, what I'm asking for. The staffing and scheduling work session was held. We held one in person and an additional one via Zoom, but the folks that were involved, I thought were very helpful. And I'm actually going to let Victor weigh in on this piece because he was our facilitator and did a fantastic job. Luke was there, Sergeant Mack, who's the president of our union, and a police sergeant in Carlisle, Carrie Baxter, who's an officer, Christian Seminatori is a part-time officer, and I were there. And I thought it went well. A lot of good ideas were shared. Victor, any thoughts about weighing in on how it went or the findings?
Yeah, I think the sessions went well. I think everybody had participated, so there wasn't anybody who was kind of silent in the during the discussions. And I think what Chief highlights here, I could just go through them because this is just summary of the discussions, is that the way that we kind of approached it was, you know, to really not evaluate the strategies at first. I think the whole point was to just brainstorm strategies. Although that was hard to do, I think there's a lot of people who have particular views and interests in the discussion. So, but I think overall we were able to get the brainstorming out on the table, which is really around these three items. I think we came up with two at first, then we started talking about them, and I think the third one came. The first one, or the third one, I'll cover off. That's essentially one that, you know, obviously Chief has brought to the select board the last few years. The other one that was one that we had put on the table was prioritization of shifts offered to part-time officers. And as it stands today, the way that the system is set up is that the full-time officers essentially get the first choice or first priority, right? They all get to bid, but then if there's a full-time officer that gets asked for a particular shift and the part-time officer asks it, it's prioritized to the full-time officer. And then there was another idea that came up, pay for time off instead of replacing overtime. That definitely wouldn't been able to address the entire issue, but I think that was one to highlight. Is there another aspect of that might just be helpful or contributory? So really, those are the only three ideas that kind of laid out. And I think that the group agreed that those really were the only three ways that we could impact the overtime. Then once we had those on the table in terms of the conversation, one is that this first bullet says part-time officers offered more shifts would not affect the needs significantly. I think that there's a couple of things around that. One is part-time officers obviously they're part-time for a reason, right? In terms of how many they would actually be able to pick up on. I think that was some guidance that Chief brought. But I think there's also this other aspect of the prioritization piece of it. There's a contractual limitation to it. So within the contract itself, that correct me if I got the number wrong, but I think it's 50% need to go to the full-time officers. And I think that's in the contract. I didn't go back and double check that, but that was what was brought up in the discussion. For the pay for time instead of replacing with overtime, they already have that in place. So that's a solution that's is already in there as it is today. And the thought is that additional hires should change the dynamics in terms of the the overtime, because of obviously you have more police officers to be able to kind of pick up on what actually is a significant contribution to the overtime, which is essentially when they take time off, somebody else has to cover, right? So is it another full-time officer that becomes their overtime? So adding additional hires should be able to fill out those shifts a little bit more completely and kind of reduce that. I think the other things that we kind of talked about, which were material, is I think there's a lot of conversation that said, well, there's mitigating circumstances, right? There is the mitigating circumstance, and I'll just go in the order that this slide is constructed, is COVID. Oh, it's COVID that caused, and it's true. So, and I can't remember, I think it was at least 2 were out as of the discussion, that when we had that discussion as a group, 2 officers who had already been out recently due to COVID and testing positive. So obviously needs to be coverage for them during that time. That said, one of the things we noted is that 2 years ago we said, oh, and I remember actually having conversations with folks like, oh, we'll be through this in a couple months. Well, we're almost 2 years in and it hasn't. And if you haven't read the news, not trying to be alarmist, but it's just the nature of it, is like, well, it's changed again, right? The UK now has a Omicron variant that they're trying to figure out whether it's actually going to be of a problem or not. So the reality is right now is that this is something that we need to kind of consider in the decision set here, is that, COVID's not going to go away tomorrow. And it might not be going away for anytime soon, from the standpoint of we're going to have to make material changes the way we do things. The other note here was, and this was a conversation that was kind of brought up by some of the officers, is that even if we do have additional full-time officers, there's an aspect of the department where the part-time officers are an integral part of it, and it's part of the culture of the way Carlisle has had it. So I think the note here is that there's still a need for them, whether it's through details or if there are any additional shifts that still are not covered by the additional full-time heads. So it's not so much that it's necessary to eliminate all of the part-time officers going down this route. Obviously, they wouldn't take the regular shifts that they're kind of required to now. They'd be used in a slightly different way, but it's not so much that totally kind of block them out and they don't necessarily have any role within the town. And the last one is that 111F is unpredictable. We have 2 right now. You can't really predict when those happen, and they have a material impact to the department. And the comment that I'll make there is it's more of a general observation. It's not only about the police department, but how we typically have approached the town as a whole. Is we don't buy, and I'll use this analogy, we don't buy a new car every other year, right? We're not on, very often you get these car sellers, oh, you go to a lease because you want a car every 3 years. Well, that's not the way that Carlisle works. We're kind of like the way I have cars, is I have a 20-year-old, almost a 20-year-old car. We run it until it doesn't go. But what the analogy here is, really the departments are resourced and tuned in such a way that if something goes wrong, like a pandemic or this 111F, then things start to become difficult. That's the way they've been designed, historically. And it's not only the police department, but in other places as well. So that's kind of the nature of the town. But this is actually also noting is that when these things happen, then it puts a bit of stress in the system. And when two of them happen, which is what we have, plus COVID, then it really becomes challenging. So I think those are considerations that were surfaced by the team, just so that select board is aware of those things. So all in all, this is kind of what the output was of the work session. Like John said, Chief said, we had one work session. We did most of this work. We actually asked for some data, and then we had a follow-up discussion. I think it was 3 days later after that. And then this is the summary of that.
And was there a general, was the Chief or Victor, would you be able to sort of was there a consensus among this group about what was being recommended? What is the course of action that has the most impact on the overtime?
Yep. So I think the way and Chief, you can certainly chime in on this, is I think that there was a hypothesis around prioritization of shifts or process change that would be able to address a large chunk of the overtime. I think after brainstorming and kind of walking through, I think the conclusion of the group is that there isn't any one or combination of them that will be able to address the issues without some material changes. I think one of the things that I don't think the team actually had essentially the thought process through, because it would require contractual changes. Would a contractual change open up greater impact in terms of the overtime impact? I think in one instance, I think it would increase the opportunity for part-timers, or the part-timers actually picking it up. But then there's also the constraint of how much capacity they would have to kind of pick up on those ones that they have as well. So I think because that's fairly material. I mean, that's dependent on a contract that's in place with the police department.
Right.
We can go in depth to that one, because that would require kind of a significant change of something that's been in the contract for, at least my understanding, it's been in the contract for beyond memory of anybody in the room.
Yeah, this is the part about 50% of the overtime going to the full timers.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think my ask remains the same, and that is that we be allowed to hire a full-time officer. I'd like that person to start, if we could, April 1st. That would be a pretty aggressive timeline. I think the other thing we would do is keep the part-time officers right where they are in their shifts, working the weekends. I think that I would also ask for that other officer to be hired July 1st. We do have the anticipation of the officer retiring as a result of the injury, which is being pursued at this time. So there's kind of some confounding things that are going on here. But those are the three that I'm asking the board to consider at this time. The first.
So John, would you just move down to I think you have one more slide, don't you? Yeah, there we go. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't done that. I'm looking at it. I don't know why you couldn't see it. I'm kidding. So the hiring up one officer as soon as possible. I don't think we'll be able to do it prior to April 1st. I think the cost for that we should consider is kind of worst case scenario, which would be $23,750, $18,750 for salary, and $5,000 for an initial equipment issue. and the second officer after July 1st. Total budget implication for FY '23, wage line would increase by 150 and uniform by 3. And at the least, I think there should be a $50,000 savings in overtime in FY '24. Obviously, these numbers are kind of all worst case scenario because I'm counting on the officer needing training and needing to go to an academy, each officer. So I don't have an offset built in here for their work to immediately reduce the overtime costs. Best case scenario, we'd hire an officer from another department or an officer that's self-sponsored to the academy. But I think worst case scenario, this would be somebody we would hire and train. But we've got to get the train moving down the track. And obviously, I think the numbers I need to provide the select board are the most expensive numbers and what this could cost the most. I wish I was proposing something that was revenue neutral, but this is what I'm proposing.
So we can, we have a little bit of time for some questions or comments. At some point, Victor, if you're comfortable, I'd be interested in hearing whether the Finance Committee has looked at this from the budget standpoint. But before that, Select Board, any other members have questions or comments for the chief?
I just have a question, John, on fiscal '23. So you see overtime savings in '24, but what about in '23 if you didn't do this compared with not doing this?
Well, I think we would expect the overtime to remain really high if we don't do this.
Right. No, I understand that. I'm saying savings.
Right. So
This compared to not doing this.
well, I mean, if we hired an officer that's self-sponsored to the academy, I think we would see an immediate savings. You know, as soon as they were, receive field training, we would see an immediate savings because there's an extra person in the schedule.
But you're saying because they have to go to the academy, you're assuming they're going to need academy training and so forth. They won't
Well,
be
I think-
fully utilized in '23.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I have to propose the worst case scenario, which is this, that we'd end up hiring an officer that's untrained right now for April 1st and an untrained officer on July 1st.
Okay.
So
And
you're
just to
talking about
remind me-
part-time officers still staying for years on at least their shifts, if not helping us out with more.
So the first one of them is a pure replacement and one is an ad. Is that correct?
Well, I can't ask for the replacement legally. I can't say that because that position is still there. That person still has a right to that position. There's a lot of moving parts to that. So I think that's why my ask is specific to hiring an officer, which would bump us to 11 full-time now. And then the officer July 1st, 2022 would bump us to 12. I don't think anything's going to happen prior to that with the officer that's pursuing the disability retirement. And that could be something you address later on. I mean, if that position is vacated and there was no appetite at the select board for keeping that position on the books, then that would be the time to look at that. But I think I have to ask for the position to be added.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Already there. All right, thank you.
But assuming the retirement, it's a +1 really.
Yes, please.
A long one. Okay, thank you.
It's a small amount, but I'm just curious why you're carrying 5,000 for initial equipment for the first guy and 3,000 for the second guy
So,
or gal.
because I don't have much left in my equipment line item right now. For next year, I think because of where our vests are, I'm not going to need to replace any. I don't anticipate hiring anybody else. You know, each year I put in a little bit extra for hiring, but Our only part-time officer that doesn't have a vest is in the process of ordering one now. We already have the money in the budget for that. So I think July 1st, I'll have that money in my budget again. It'll actually be 5,000, but only 3,000 of it's new.
Got it. I figured it.
So the
And
second
I-
guy doesn't get socks.
Yeah, yeah, right. And I just wanted to say, Chief, you know, I've been supporting this extra officer for quite a while, so I'm in support of this. Okay.
Marnie, if I may,
Yes, please.
go ahead, Luke. I don't want, you were on the committee. Speak up.
Yeah, no, just a couple of quick things. So, one of the findings, the part-time officers offered more shifts would not necessarily affect the needs significantly. So that's not as clear cut as it sounds. There's a scheduling software, and then there's the piece in the contract, and there's also the other factor of part-timers actually putting in for the shifts, right? So, just so folks get clarity, we did go down the road of, okay, if we, all of a sudden I've got blue lines on the thing. We did go down the road of, if we stayed with the 10 and tried to shift, and I think Victor touched on this, there's a contract change that would have to happen, right? But also too, with the way, well, actually, there's a couple of contract changes that would have to happen, because with the way that it's structured now is, Chief or Victor, correct me on this, or Kate, you probably can, because you're familiar with the contract. When certain hours by full-timers are vacated, if that's the right word, or given up, they have to be taken by full-timers, right? Or they're given full-timers, right? Two full-timers. So that doesn't impact the 50-50 piece. And then there's the 50-50 piece on top of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there's certain days, the status of different days depends on who they can go for. And a side conversation that you and I can have is what I discussed with the president of the union today. So previously, one of the things that came up at that meeting was previously the part-time officers were eligible for more shifts. For example, some of the lieutenants' days off. Everything that they were, and I did change that January 1st. We went to electronic scheduling. While I don't think it's going to be extremely statistically significant, we are going back to the old system immediately. And we're going to work how to do that electronically. So all the shifts of part-timers were available for. It was one of their concerns. They came up during that committee meeting, and it's a legitimate concern. So we're going to address that. But so that everything that the full-timers are eligible for in their contract, they're going to be eligible for. Everything the part-timers have ever been eligible for since I've been here, we're going to ensure that they're eligible for that too. Because that will help this be more affordable. But to your point, I know that you guys had some suggestions on some things that we would not be able to do because of the contract.
Right.
And
Exactly.
they're not really extremely stringent things. It's kind of normal course of business.
Yeah. No, so I just wanted to bring that up because it's, as we kind of dug into a lot of this stuff, there are a lot of idiosyncrasies with a lot of these things that make it a little more complex. Yes, there was that. There's also, so then there's the piece with the part-time. I should have written it down. There's a piece with the part-timers, having to take more, right? If they're offered more, right? The only way this benefits is if they take more, right? And I guess kind of what we've seen is, there are a few officers on both sides, full-time and part-time, that take the lion's share of the overtime, right? And so be it, right? I mean, that's just the way that the dynamic of the department works. And I think everybody was in agreement that, as certain people retire, and that dynamic changes, unless you get somebody that's going to come in and backfill all that overtime, which is unlikely. I think everybody was in agreement that, within 3 to 5 years, no matter what we decide now, we're heading towards a full-time department. Just because of the way that, the desire for people to take overtime and whatnot is changing. And then just the other piece, and like this was a part that I, maybe because I joined the discussion kind of after, I was kind of the new guy on the thing, is for the officer that could potentially retire, right? That's not a definite, right? So like that was always kind of a sticking point for me. And I just want folks to think about that, because there is an impact if that officer doesn't retire, right? So it's you've got one hire that would come now, one hire that would come July 1, right? And then another hire that may not be a hire, right? Because the individual may come back, right? So it's kind of instantly getting to the 12. It's not really just 11, right? So just something to think about. And it's I don't know. It's just we've kind of, and again, I'm not trying to sway one way or the other, but it's just we've agonized over an officer for all these years, and now in a sense it would be bringing two on, and then because I honestly I don't see the other position going away. I think if we do this right, we're really setting the course for 12. So that's just my 2 cents.
So Luke, just to see if I understand this correctly, you're saying we hired 2 new officers now. The officer that may indeed retire, at the point at which that person does retire, you're thinking we would end up filling that position as well. So we would end up with a 3rd full-time officer.
Yeah, well, I think, I think ultimately, yeah, well, we discussed this and yeah, and I know the chief said that, that ultimately we don't have to, right? But, we're kind of already in that boat where it's budgeted, right? And, and, but it's more so, I guess the concern is more so if that individual doesn't, right? There's no way to take that back, right?
Right. Right.
So, we do the 2 hires and that individual stays. Yeah,
We're carrying the 3 full-time positions then.
Exactly. So, and
Yeah.
so it's just something for everybody to consider, right? Because yeah, if, and if he does retire, then, then we have the opportunity to either do a wait and see or whatnot, right? But if it's, and we batted this around, right? Because you can't force somebody to retire, right? And and while it seems like the individual is leaning towards retirement, it's not decided, right? So it's hard because it would come right at budget time. You know what I mean? So like the timing of it couldn't be any worse. But it's something to think about because it's, it could be a significant cost, if you will. And especially if the individual goes out again. So, I mean, like there's,
Yeah.
a lot of things to think about, right? So,
Yeah.
so I just want to get that out.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the time and we have a couple of other significant pieces on the agenda. I know that this is something the chief has brought up many, many times. I am not sure though if we're ready right now in the next 5 minutes to make a decision as a select board to approve the hire of either one new officer as of this, for this fiscal year, and or a second officer for the July of 2023 fiscal year. So I want to get a sense of the rest of the board. Are people feeling ready to make a decision tonight, or do we want to consider it and bring it up for an actual vote in 2 weeks?
If I could just say a couple things. First, so I think, I support this. I, would say, though, if the person, to Chief Fisher, if the person does retire, let's not use that money next fiscal year, and let's and let's talk about pulling it back out in the following year. Because that would be salary that was there. So let's just have an agreement. We're not going to spend that money because it will, this really saves money. It really makes sense if that person does retire. And then let's not just assume that we're going to be able to hire it. So it's not necessarily immediately going to 12, but I think it's absolutely wise of Chief Fisher to come here with this is the worst case scenario. I think I wouldn't recommend that we're necessarily voting tonight on that second one, because we don't do that at the, but we do that, but I would recommend that we ask FinCom to put it in in the numbers, so that we see what the impact is. And I'd still be inclined to support it, but I don't know what all the other numbers are yet, right? But I'm supportive of this, and I think I'd be supportive of yaying or naying the current the current year hire this year, and saying that we'll put it in the budget for next year and see what happens, but inclined to approve that as well, with again the agreement that we're not going to spend the money if the person retires, and we're not going to automatically hire somebody else. Let's have that discussion then, because it's all based upon that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Chief.
So I would remind you of one thing. I always have to come to you guys to even ask permission to post a position. I've never gone, if somebody retired, then, the next day, throw a one ad up. It's always a process. I think it's always been important to all of us involved to do this the right way. So you'll have that. You definitely always have that.
Right. Thank you for reminding me of that.
To your point, Nathan, I would never, but thank you.
I think it's urgent that we make a decision about the hire one officer ASAP, because ASAP is just that, it's ASAP. And I don't see why we would wait 2 more weeks. I mean, Chief Fisher has been asking for this for a couple of months now. It was ASAP then. I would like us to make a decision about that one, if nothing else tonight. And then we can talk about the second one, putting it in the budget. But I think we need to let him move ahead on this new hire, because he really needs the help in the department right now for the time.
Barney, just one comment on that. So here, Chief has that added to budget. There's no magic wand that you do to add to budget, right? So it has to come out at a trade-off from somewhere. I think we had some discussion around whether something like this, and the way it's couched, I'm not sure we can consider this as like a reserve transfer, like an emergency of some sort that was unexpected. I have had some conversation with Jim as to how we might be able to consider that, but I think the way it's couched, as it's not necessarily a preemptive replacement, because legally we can't do it that way, of somebody who's going to retire. I'll have to go back and check, right? So I think this concept added to budget is not as simple as is on the slide.
You don't just have a bucket of money you can pull it out of.
That's right.
So I mean,
Well, what if
could we say that we approve this pending Victor and FinCom finding a reasonable place to find the money, and if not, if it's another discussion, then we'll talk about it in 2 weeks.
I mean, we're talking about 23,000 or less, right? If we can't get somebody by April.
Right.
Saying we have to make it contingent on a 0.01% or whatever of our $30 million budget. I mean, I assume.
I wasn't saying it was contingent. I was saying it's approved, but come back to
No,
us
I mean,
if you
I
can't
agree
find the
with,
money.
I guess I'll go more with the Kate. Like, let's approve that one. We'll figure out the money side. That's our job. And then I also agree with Nathan and Kate's comments that the second officer, the 100, the extra money for another officer really has to be put to FinCom to fit into the overall budget picture. It's very difficult. We shouldn't be making those decisions in a vacuum on the budget.
Right. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So who is ready to make a motion then that we approve the hiring of a full-time police officer for this fiscal year as soon as possible?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All right, hearing none, let's go with a roll call vote then. Arnold, I.
Oscar, aye.
Brown eye.
Model I.
Reed, aye.
Okay, that's passed unanimously. And then I don't think we need to take a vote on it, but I think we can say we approve, well, unless others think we do need to, but I think the sentiment of the board is clearly that we want to see an additional full-time officer added to the FY23 budget proposal, and have the FinCom do that at the earliest possible date, and then come back and let's see where we are in terms of
Yeah,
the budget.
plus the other officer we just added.
Right, to be carried into fiscal year 23, correct?
So I mean,
Uh,
they should add it,
Victor-
but they should recommend, they should make a recommendation to us.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Right.
but
So-
you know, they deal with the money, but we're telling them this is something we would like them to figure out, right?
I
Yeah, I know you've raised this before, David,
I
but,
know I'm starting
you know,
to.
Yes.
they determine the financial feasibility of things, but the select board does have a role in saying what we
Of
believe
course.
makes sense for the
Yeah,
town.
No, of course.
I think
Let's
there's a bigger picture that I'd like to see this in context with, though, because we have other personnel
Yep,
asks in the town.
That's right.
So I
Yeah.
would like to see the second one looked at in that context. I'm only ready, honestly, to be talking about this first officer, which I think is, you know, really, really important. I think the second one is important as well, but I think I want to see it in context with the other personnel needs that we have in town.
I agree with that.
I'll just make a comment from a FinCom perspective, and I think this is just to make sure that we're clear in terms of how personnel decisions are made. I think from the standpoint of, and it always seems to get mixed up, and I think Kate kind of has it laid out correctly. And I just kind of kind of detail it out, is that, you know, personnel board and select board essentially come to the conclusion that we need this role, right? And then goes to FinCom, and FinCom looks at it and says, well, you know, if you're going to keep it at 2.5%, you got to choose between X, Y, and Z. You got these two roles, you got this, and then it comes back to you to actually prioritize which one is most important. But the first step is that, you know, you've assessed, you've heard the chief, you've assessed and said, we believe and support this particular role. And then FinCom comes back and tells you what oops, is that me?
No,
that's
it,
the chief. We're getting feedback from the chief, but
Okay.
No, it's
Uh,
somebody named Bob Mercier that's you're getting the feedback from.
yes, exactly.
So I think, you know, I think Kate had noted it, you know, correctly, right? I think in this kind of decision, you're essentially saying to FinCom that we support this officer. We support that there is a need for this second officer. We will come back to you and say, okay, that second officer is what, $78,000 to the budget. That doesn't fit within what we would consider, you know, the reasonable, whatever, the increase on taxes. Here is the things on the table that we would suggest you consider as prioritization. Or you could go to the third option to say, well, you know, maybe we need to consider increasing taxes more than whatever, right? Depends on what the number is. But I think there needs to be some decision by the board to say, we believe that this is a role that
Right.
needs to be considered, right?
right. So I think, let me see if I am stating this correctly for the board as a whole. That first of all, that we it is our position, and we have just voted to have an additional full-time officer hired in this fiscal year. And we're going to leave it to the FinCom and the select board to figure out how to pay for that. We are not ready as a board, hearing from both Kate and David, we're not ready as a board to say, yes, we definitely want that second officer. We think the community, the town needs that second officer to be included in the fiscal year 23 budget. We're going to wait on that. Is that?
Well, we're actually asking, I think what we're doing is we're saying, we think this is a priority. FinCom, please put it in, and then we can see what the impact is and prioritize it against the other things.
That's right. That's correct.
Yeah. So we are in fact asking FinCom to
Asking
put it
for
in.
Okay, to be to be
Yes.
considered in the budget,
So that we
but
can
also
see the
to
numbers.
include consideration of the other hiring recommendations, right? We want to look at the whole budget.
Right, and there may be other positions that we're making the same,
Right,
taking
right,
the same step with.
yeah. All right, is that everybody comfortable with that on the select board? Okay, and Victor, does that make sense to you?
Yes. So
Okay.
I think what I heard is that you're considering this officer as necessary for the town. But then does it fit in the budget? That's the next piece that you need to look at, and what are the trade-offs if it doesn't? So and
You're
we'll come back.
talking about you're talking about the
second one.
second officer.
Yes.
The second
Yes.
hire, correct.
Yep.
The first hire, we're going ahead with, and we'll figure out where the money's going to come from in this fiscal year. Okay.
Right, but he or she becomes part of the baseline of 23.
Right, for the fiscal 23. So that's got to be added no matter what. And then on top of that, we want FinCom to take a look at the possibility of a second officer. Okay, good. I think we're in agreement. And Chief, I really appreciate how long this has been, and your persistence, and we're finally moving ahead.
I want to thank all of you for the support, and I look forward to reporting back when I have more news on the hire. Thank you all.
Good, thank you. And thank you, Victor.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
Let's move ahead. We have, my apologies to the municipal resources folks that have been waiting to be part of the conversation about the search firm that the search firm that we're looking to hire to help us find and hire an interim town administrator and potentially a permanent town administrator. Tim, would you like to make an introduction here?
Sure. I think the board has in your packet a memo from me summarizing the RFQ process, request for quotes process that we recently conducted to retain an executive recruitment firm for the process, the purpose rather of hiring first an interim town administrator and then a full-time town administrator as the board had directed. Obviously, time is of the essence, and we conducted that process earlier this month. There were two proposals that were received. You see the results there. The successful proposer was MRI. And we do have with us tonight Alan Gould, one of the principals of MRI, and also Buzz Stabczynski and Bob Mercier, two of their consultants who are former town managers in Massachusetts and have a world of experience in executive recruitment and done this in many, many communities, to name just a few: Acton, Bedford, and Concord in recent years. So I know that they would like to talk with the board about their process, and I know the board has questions and thoughts as well. So I guess we could turn it over to Alan, who speaks for MRI, and he could introduce Bob and Buzz.
Great, Tim, thank you. Just maybe a minute about MRI. We've been in business now for, I guess, 33 years. And we've done recruitments all over New England. We always have a few going on someplace. I have a few going on in New Hampshire right now. Buzz and Bob have a few going in Mass and one in Rhode Island. We do Connecticut as well, Maine and Vermont. My former career is I was interested in your previous discussion because I spent my career. I'm a retired police chief who then became a town administrator and has been with MRI for the last 14 years as the vice president, now the president. So I oversee all of our recruitments. And with that, I'll let Buzz introduce himself and then Bob.
Hi, I'm Buzz Stapchinsky. I have 40 years of municipal experience in Massachusetts. Most recently retired as town manager of Andover after 25 years. And then I had 12 years, 10 as town manager in Wilmington. And before that, several years as the assistant there. And actually, in full disclosure, my wife has a company called Human Resource Services, Inc., and I assisted her in I believe it was a pay and class study that was done in Carlisle probably 5 or 6 years ago. Shortly after my retirement, I assisted her, and I still do from time to time when she lets me. Otherwise, I'm with Alan. Robert.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but Bob, there's a lot of feedback. Yeah, we can't hear you now. All right, so why don't we just continue on then? I think Bob's got, I think his face is on his iPad, and I think he's got maybe a laptop going at the same time. They both have their audio on. So, Madam Chair, I'll leave that to you to walk us through what you'd like to hear.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got the information in our packets. I don't know if every select board member has been able to go through that carefully. Bob, we're getting feedback again.
I'm gonna turn it off. Yep.
It's still getting feedback.
Yep, I'm gonna turn it off.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
All right, great. Bob, do you want to just say a couple of minutes on your background? Oops, you're muted. Bob, you're muted.
Madam Chair, go ahead.
Okay, we'll go
he
ahead
can't hear
then.
us.
So I think what would be useful, not to know, the specifics of what you would do, but sort of what is your approach, your general approach to finding appropriate candidates for this position for our particular town?
So I can start and Buzz can jump in if he wants to, but part of this is understanding the needs of the town. So it's what you folks are looking for, and it's what are the challenges in your community that are going to be faced, over the short term and then the more midterm. And making sure that we advertise that properly. We talked in our proposal about making sure that we identify the place of Carlisle, because that's really important. You folks are a great town. So we want to make sure that we separate the opportunity in Carlisle from the opportunity that these people may be looking at in other places. Why Carlisle? So that's very important. We have to make sure that we place the ads in the proper venues. And then maybe even more importantly, and Buzz and Bob are phenomenal at this, south of New Hampshire, and I take care of it in New Hampshire for sure, is that we reach out into the pools of candidates that we've had in other recruitments. And sometimes we even go outside of that just because of the network that we have, and we actively recruit people that we think would be a really good fit, where this would be the next step for them, or this would be another opportunity, maybe on pay scale wise, a different community for them. And so we really kind of go out and look for those folks that we think would be a good fit for you.
And how would you distinguish that process, or how you would approach that when we're looking for an interim administrator?
Well, I mean, I think we'd want to talk about actually the need for an interim administrator, but the field is going to be smaller for an interim administrator. You're hiring somebody for what might be a couple of months. So it's
No,
it's not-
we're probably, excuse me for interrupting, but I think we're looking at probably a year, somewhere between 6 months and a year, potentially.
All right, I guess we would, obviously it's up to you, you're the client. We just have to, these recruitments aren't getting any easier. The pools are getting smaller. We used to have 100 applicants for a pool. Now we're lucky to get 20. And you know, there may be a great reason to delay. I don't know what that might be. I'm sure you folks do and could tell us that. So we have a network of people we know who might be available for this, and we would start with those folks. And then see what path that leads us down. And then again, we would kind of do the same thing with try to actively source some people that we think would be a great fit.
One other question from me, and then I hope the other members of the select board will offer their questions. What role do you see a committee of folks representing the town playing in the process of the search process?
Well, you know, there's committees, there's panels. It's really kind of up to the town, although we do have kind of a preference how we like to go. So, you know, we like to get input from the community. We included in the proposal a couple of listening sessions that we would typically do on an afternoon or an evening or a morning or an evening to get input from the community. We open up an email address that allows people to contact us directly with things that they think that they'd like us to know about the community, about what they're looking for, about what those challenges might be. And then if you appoint a committee to do this, I think you need to be very careful in the charge, how you charge that committee. Very often we like to have a panel that does an interview at the screening level. So we would screen through everybody. We'd present the top candidates, let's say, you know, 6 or so candidates to a screening panel. We call it a screening committee, search committee. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're responsible for it. And the board is the hiring body. So, you know, we can use a community panel, however the town sees fit. Again, it's just, we're gonna be able to assign experience and the attributes that we know will be successful. So at that point, the committee can give us how the personal fit is with the community. But at the end of the day, it's up to the board of selectmen. So very often we make the screening down to 5 or 6 candidates, move it to the board, facilitate interviews with the board, and then the board would select probably the top 2 or 3 candidates that they want to do more in-depth interviews with.
Alan, if I may.
Yeah.
For the last several years, I've done a number of communities about your size: Hadley, Massachusetts, Georgetown, Boxford, and 2 of those 3, we brought the finalists to the select board. They did not use a screening panel. We met with the select board as a group individually. We found out what they were looking for, the characteristics, the traits, the experience, that sort of thing in the next TA. And we brought them candidates that could fit that bill, meet those requirements. And then it was up to them, up to the select board to determine the right fit for their community. So, you know, every community is a little different, whether they're going to have a panel, a subcommittee, that sort of thing, a screening committee, a search committee. But ultimately, it's the select board's decision. And what we encourage, if you do use a panel, a screening committee, we tell them, come up with folks, 4 or 5, perhaps at the select board interview, that all have the qualifications, that can do the job. Don't rank them. Just bring a list of people who can fit the bill, and then have the select board. Obviously, it's your decision. It's your decision who has the right fit for your community. So, you know, it really depends on how you folks want to, you know, structure the process. We can do it either way, but ultimately it's the select board's decision.
Yeah,
no matter how you do it.
yeah, we're all fully aware that it would be our decision. So thank you. And Buzz, would you be the person that would actually be working with our town? Were we to go with your firm?
Yes, it would be Bob and I.
Okay,
We would meet with you as a group individually. We
Yeah.
would conduct the listening sessions, interview the department heads and other people in the community that you think are important for us to talk with. Yeah,
Good.
most certainly. It'd be
Okay.
Bob and I.
Good.
Alan, of course, is president of the firm, and he has oversight over the whole project.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Other members of the board?
I'm ready.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you guys for this. So I guess two different questions. So Buzz, my experience on previous high-profile recruitments in the municipal space was as a school committee member for the superintendent. And the way we did, so similar, the analogous situation is that it's the school committee's hire, so of course they get to do the final decision. But the process that we engaged, which worked well, and we did it a few different times for other positions as well, was to have a wider screening group. Well, there's really, it's a two-part process. There's a sort of job spec process, right? Which I think, what Alan was saying and what I think is the right process is you sort of cast a wide net of opinions to gather your own, you as an MRI's own view of what the spec is. What are the qualities that you want in the town administrator describing the town, et cetera, et cetera. So I presume you do that and then vet it through select board or somebody. Then the second piece is the actual screening of finalists or semifinalists or whatever, the group that you vetted and you want to present. And I guess my own feeling, maybe this is more to address the select board than you guys, is you do want to bring in not just the select board. Of course, it's the select board's hire, but other people really should play an active role. We need to gather other opinions. So that's sort of a statement. The questions I have, you seem, at least maybe Alan seems to be, and I saw it in the proposal, advocating might be too strong a word, but suggesting in phase 1 versus phase 2 that we might just go direct to an administrator and not fool around with an interim. So again, I have a question and then a sort of a statement. So the question is, you mentioned the applicant pools are getting smaller. You didn't really refer to interims. And again, I'm reflecting on my experience as a school board member. There's a whole group of sort of semi-retired superintendents who are happy to take a 1-year assignment. They're just in that business. They're no longer interested in the career. They just want to kind of have a short-term thing. And the question is whether there are any such of those in town administrator, town manager. And then the statement or the contextual statement for you is, at least from my belief, that we got a lot of things going on in the town. A lot of things are changing, and it may be beneficial for us to get somebody like that who's got a lot of experience, not especially interested for themselves in a career move, but could give us a view for 6 months or a year, kind of a view of what's going on and help us shape the second half of the search. And we did that. I remind us that prior to, I think, John Fisher coming on board, didn't we get Weatherby or one of those guys as a interim police chief after Sullivan? I think we did, and that helped us.
Good.
So that's sort of a lot of stuff, but let me turn it back to you guys for comment.
If I could address that for a second, I'll start with the interim piece first, and that's that at any given time, we have interims in probably 8 to 10 places, whether they're fire chiefs, police chiefs, town administrators, or school business administrators. So we do a lot of that interim work, and we get that. The difference is there's sometimes a geographic limitation to the people that you're going to have for an interim. So if you're gonna hire a person full time, they're gonna make a move if they need to relocate, and they're gonna be committed. So if you're gonna have an interim, there's such a geographical area. I have somebody right now that's commuting from Keene to Claremont 3 days a week. That's about an hour and a half, so it's 3 hours round trip, and that's kind of a long ride for an interim. So you are limited to somewhat by geography with the interim. There are plenty of people out there, so then it becomes what their energy level, what their motivation is to do the work for the town in those areas you need. You've also got to consider that you're kind of putting the town staff through one more set of, in the police department. If you have a police chief, that's a really big impact on the police department. Not so much an impact on the fire department, on finance, on planning, on those areas. Whereas when you have an interim town administrator, and again, we do it all over the place, it puts more of a strain on all those people. Now they're going through one transition for 6 months or a year, and then you're transitioning someone else in. So whenever we can go to a permanent, especially if we can provide for some overlap between the two, we think that that's ideal. It gets the town stabilized more quickly. And if we have the right person, that person's going to have the skills, the skill set and the experiences that match what your needs are as you go through the next year. So that's just my feeling on that. I will say that a municipal side recruitment is very different than a superintendent recruitment. We do some superintendent recruitments, and it's very different. And what we have found is if you delay too much with the end game, you're going to lose candidates. By the time they've gotten to that part of the process, they've gone through, they've submitted their resumes and whatnot, cover letters. They've answered a series of essay questions that we've sent out, which we have sent out, which we would expect them to spend a good deal of time on. They've gone through a phone interview with us. They've gone through, likely at that point, if you're going to have a screening committee or an interview panel, they've gone through that, and then they've gone through this with the board. And you got to remember that these pools are small, so the competition is very steep for these folks. And if somebody else's process gets done sooner, and it's just as nice a community, they're going to be gone.
Yeah, but I mean, you're suggesting, I think, Alan, you're suggesting that we would run them in parallel, and we wouldn't do that. In other words, whenever you do it, whether it's this year or next year, you've got the same dynamics. You've got the pool and you've got the clock. So maybe there's a misunderstanding. If we went with an interim, that's what we would do. We would place an interim, and we would not be looking for a permanent. We wouldn't keep resumes hanging fire. We wouldn't dangle them out. We would just simply commit to an interim. We'd run an interim search. We'd get an interim. We'd deal with that. And then we would take up a second search, which I think is your option 2, inside the 12, whatever, 13K for the permanent. And then that clock would start when it starts, and it wouldn't be a longer clock. It would be that clock. So I guess I don't really understand what you're saying there. On the part about, it being different than a superintendent, I don't agree. I mean, they could make the same point. And there are interims, and sometimes you want interims. It may not be a right idea for us to have an interim, and I don't want to dismiss, what you're saying, but you have a big if statement there. If you get the right candidate, it'll be great. Of course, if we get the right candidate, it'll be great. If you get the wrong candidate, it's not great. And that's the whole reason why, because we're not completely certain in everything, that we might want an interim to help us with that. So I just want to make those points pretty strongly, because I don't think you're really addressing what I'm saying.
Well,
Okay, well, let's hold on. I think that you've put out some. We understand I think what both you're suggesting, Alan, and the process you might follow, and I think we've clarified that what we want right now is a search for an interim. And if we were to hire you, and then we could have the conversation again about, does it really make sense, and sort of go into more detail. But let me just ask, though, I think, Nathan, if you have some things you want to ask or comments you want to make.
Yeah, sure. So, but I'll start with, not to beat the interim, non-interim thing. I'm not sure why we would just go for an interim if there's a good candidate for a full time. So I think we're not all aligned on that, and we probably have to have discussions about that. But I would like to talk a little bit about the process and the flexibility in that process. I was a part of the fire chief search committee here, and there were a number of components of that search that I found very disconcerting. And I just wanted to make sure that we don't have to kind of go down that same path again. One was everything was geared around like a question. It was like a questionnaire or a survey or something, or interviews, and everything was ranked by number, and people progressed only based upon that number. There weren't any other factors as far as cultural fit to the organization. Like, are they coming from a big city and we're a small town? There are all kinds of factors. And there was a lot of pushback when at least when I brought up, wait a second, it's not just all about these numbers. And so I just want to make sure that we're not going down that path again. And also, the other thing is that, as you rightly pointed out, the pool is small, the communities are small, the world is small in this space. And I just want to make sure that we are a part of and understand the message given back to people who we decide against, because I think some of the feedback that was given back, in my opinion, wasn't appropriate, and I can talk to you about that offline. But I think, I just want to make sure that, Carlisle is not represented in a negative light to candidates that we are deciding that we are not going to move forward with. Those were two things that happened, I think, in the last one. I just want to make sure absolutely there has to be flexibility in the process, and we have to have a say in kind of the messaging back to people who we are not hiring. I do think we should also the other thing came up is I do think we should have a committee and not just kind of go directly with the Board of Selectmen. I think we need to move fast, and a committee is going to be able to move faster.
Okay, so if I could address that a little bit. The only numbers that we use at all are internally when we score resumes, but we use what I call an inclusive process. So if we look at somebody's resume and we say, boy, not an ideal fit, but let's move them forward to the next round. So we keep somebody in the process until they've kind of proven that they shouldn't go forward any further. And that might be through the essays, that they might not have the experience that you need, the writing skills, and we may determine that in the essays. It may be at the phone interviews that they fall out. So there's no numbers, there's no formulas that go into this at all. This is based on our experience of doing, I oversee 30 or 40 of these a year. So, and it's the team's experience. Bob and Buzz have just an outstanding track record in Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island. So, that shouldn't be a factor as far as I'm concerned. It's not in our recruitments on this side of the house. Let's see, and then I guess I forgot the second part of that question.
It was just the feedback too.
Oh, sure. So so we have somebody that corresponds with all the candidates, and we're very careful about the message because we never know what candidate might be rejected for Carlisle, but might be the absolute best fit for the next town down the road. And I'm always kind of pleased with the positive feedback that we get from candidates. Almost everyone tells us if they get back to us, geez, I'm sorry I didn't get this, but I really appreciate the way that you handled us, handled the communication throughout the process. And very often those people end up getting another job someplace else on another day. And then they hire us because they liked the way that they were treated in the process. So, probably most people that get rejected at some place along that process are going to be hired somewhere, sometime, and are also a potential client. So,
Right.
which is
So I
very
get that. I get that, and which means
we're
that you would have
representing
to.
the town of Carlisle.
So I think I totally get it. They could be another client of yours, and you want to have a good relationship. I want to make sure though that the message from Carlisle is well understood, so that we are also not burning any bridges and delivering and having the wrong message delivered.
That's a given. I can't understand.
Because
what
there are candidates. They're your clients, but there are candidates, and so it's it's our message back to them, not really
Yeah.
yours. You're delivering it, but it's our
If-
message.
If I may, let's say we bring you 3 candidates. You interview the 3, and you really like, Smith. What we have you do is the motion you made is a contingent offer of employment based on 2 things: based on a successful negotiation of a contract and a acceptable background investigation, which we do for you. And we have had cases recently where the number 1 candidate could not come to terms with the select board in terms of compensation or benefits or one thing or another. So Jones, who was the next person, I called Jones. Jones met with the board and reached a contractual agreement. So we don't we don't dwell on the negative, should there be any, at that stage. There's no use to doing it. We tell the board, when you discuss the candidates publicly, emphasize the positive. Hire somebody for the positive reasons, and if you don't like the other 2, then you don't have to dwell into the negatives, because that reflects you're right, it reflects bad on the town. So we really we take the high road as much as we can, because as I said, sometimes the number 1 doesn't always work out. So then you're not going to reopen the search, but you have 2 other candidates who are equally good, and they're worth perhaps a second interview or more in-depth kind of discussion.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Bob. I'm conscious of the time here, and I'm wondering if either Kate or Luke have other questions to raise or comments to make. I think we should try to wrap up this portion of the agenda, and I'll come back to sort of what the next steps are, but I think we should try to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. So Luke, do you want to make any comment?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any questions, but I agree with Nathan in the respect that I think, if the right candidate comes along, then what's the point of an interim one? I think we get into that interim piece when, it's Tim's getting ready to go and we don't really have anybody, and it's a different scenario. But I mean, if we have a candidate that we like, you pounce, right? I mean, we do it in industry all the time. We can have a very long hiring process or a short one, right? But you fulfill the criteria, and I have no idea. I saw, in terms of the demand for these individuals. I mean, if you guys say that there's a high demand and that ultimately you got to move quick, I think for a municipality, I think Carlisle could probably move quick if we needed to. So again, it's just, the right person is going to be critical here. So, I don't think we should necessarily limit ourselves one way or the other. That's all.
Well, that's a conversation I think we as a select board, we need to zero in on soon and be clear about what we're saying we want. Kate, did you have questions?
It sort of sounds like or feels now, listening to all this, that we may be a little ahead of our skis, because we have not had that conversation. And so I would say, in terms of next steps, that's our first next step, is to talk about interim or not, and then making that some sort of specific decision about that. We do have a new governance committee, which is out there, was looking at the position of town administrator. And so that's, I think, part of the impetus behind the idea of having the interim, to allow time to then, to know what it is we're looking for, because I don't think we do know what we're looking for in either an interim or a permanent. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
All right, so what I'm hearing and what I feel myself is that we need another conversation as a select board before we make a decision about moving ahead with your firm, Alan. And I appreciate your coming tonight and letting us meet you and hear more about how you would handle finding a administrator for our town. I think what we'll have to do is say we will get back to you. It won't be it'll be, 2 weeks from now, a couple days after 2 weeks from now, when we have our next select board meeting and we can dig deeper among ourselves and come up with a more clear what it is exactly we want you to do for us.
Sure.
So rest of the board comfortable with that? Nathan, you good with that? Okay, great. So that's what we'll do, and really appreciate you coming in tonight, Buzz and Bob and Alan, and we'll be back to you, in a couple of weeks.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Stay well.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. I see you're on the call, and I know you're here for this next part of the agenda, which is to look at the warrant articles we have for the annual town meeting. We all have the list. Tim sent out the hot off the presses this afternoon, another probably not final version, but it's the most up-to-date one we have, and it's the one that has 15 recurring articles, and then there are 23 potential warrant articles on it. So Tim, do you want to give a brief overview, and then Wayne, if you had comments you wanted to make, or if you're just here to hear the discussion, that's fine too. But Tim, yeah, why don't you give us an overview here? Tim, I think you're muted.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
okay.
yeah. You probably should look for a new town administrator with some basic AV skills. That would be one recommendation. I hope everyone can see the list. It changed a little bit. We got some last minute entries. The first 15 articles should be familiar ones. Those are those annual recurring articles that we see from year to year, the operating budget and budget transfers and certain authorizations and so forth, some of which on the consent agenda. So I guess we won't spend too much time on the articles that we know will definitely be there. We did receive a list of 23 potential articles, and then these are, not a lot of detail. A lot of departments just asked for a placeholder and gave us the subject matter. So I can go through that list if you'd like, Madam Chair, or.
Well, I think maybe we could probably, I think the first 6, I think we're all familiar with, because we talked about them off and on. I mean, maybe not number 3, but that's about a specific development, and I don't think we need to really go into that. But if you drop down to number 7 and 8, well, we know we're gonna revisit that. So I think I would go to number 9, but we really don't know what that's going to be, do we, until we see the master plan recommendations.
Right, we don't know
Right,
if there
so-
will be.
Yeah, maybe you want to start with number 10 then, and update us on what you have.
Number 10, the governance task force asked if we would hold aside as many as 4 placeholders for warrant articles. I think most of you saw what they sent to us today, with about 12 possible areas of focus on that are going to be part of their report that they make to the town. I would say some of them are potential warrant articles. Some of them I think don't require town meeting action. And some of them, the proposed bylaws, I think it might be too close to April to fully draft a bylaw and kind of socialize the concept in order to bring it to town meeting. But there are a few that stood out to me on their list. Number 6, it appears that the town never formally ratified the position of finance director. And that's the simple acceptance of a section of the general laws, chapter 43C, section 11. I mean, it was an oversight apparently, because we've had finance directors from Larry Barton to Kim Kane in the present day, and that will be an easy one to clean up. Some of the other ones might, we're having them in on the February 8th to that meeting, so that might be the time to walk through this list with them. Again, some of them, would be subject to a bylaw, and I think others could be just administrative changes that the board makes. For instance, you don't need a bylaw to hire an HR director. You could just go ahead and do that if you had the budget, but.
Yeah, and I believe, Tim, that Tom Harrington, Town Council, is looking at that list and discussing with the chair of the governance task force so that they understand what really would require a town meeting article and what does not.
Right.
So hopefully that will be cleared up by the time they come in to see us.
Right. So we do have space for them on the warrant if they, they want to advance a few of those concepts. Number 11, the access road at Concord Carlisle High School, a repaving project will be coming to the town again. It's about a $1.5 million project, and I'm not sure what the town's share is, but they've asked us to hold a spot for that, and we will. There's also a planned project at the Ripley building that's not coming to town meeting. That's going to be funded through the town of Concord's resources. So it's just going to be the access road that we've seen before, I think. But
yeah, this is the one for the high school, which we were going to vote on last year, but Concord met first in their town meeting and they voted it down. So we didn't discuss it at our town meeting.
Right. And I think number 12, I think Kate was mentioning this one earlier, the possible.
That's probably not going to be moved because I'm pretty sure it takes another year. It's in land court now, and then our the trust attorney said that there's a year waiting period after it goes to land court. So we're not going to get those 2 parcels this year.
Okay.
But don't take it off yet. I want to just still make sure. I want to ask her yet again, just one more time.
Okay, number 13, the Conservation Commission has a proposed project for repairs to the Cranberry Bog Dam number 1. And that's on the list. We've been petitioned by the developer of Lions Gate Road.
Sorry. Nope, sorry, real quick.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
With 13, I thought, when did Sylvia bring this to you? I thought that was going to be a CPA request.
About a month ago, maybe she's hedging her bets. I don't know.
Yeah, so that may turn into a CPA request, just enough.
Okay.
It'd be better to be there because it's.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a much smaller ask than Greeno, so.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So there's the street acceptance, Lionsgate Road.
Has that been referred back to the planning board?
It
because that's a fairly long process.
Yeah, it just came in this week from the attorney for the developer. So we will do that. The planning board, I think, has room on March 14th, that agenda to do a hearing for Lionsgate Road. So they're aware of it, but they they just haven't seen it. Let's see. 15, the proposed citizens petition for the signage in the town rotary as a result of the Complete Streets project. I believe I blanking on her name now. She came before the board a number of months ago. There are citizens who are not happy with the number of signs, the color of the signs, the size of the signs. And it's their right to bring a petition to town meeting. The board could put it on as well. I guess the long and the short of it is that, and Luke knows this as well, that we found that the signage, it's standard, it's required by Mass Highway. The number of signs, the location of the signs, the color of the signs, even, we can't alter. What we did find is that the signs that the engineer spec'd were larger than is required. They're 36-inch diameter signs, and we really could legally replace them with 30-inch diameter signs, but that's literally the only thing we can do to that project and still sort of maintain our obligations under the grant agreement that helped fund the project.
We're
But
absolutely 100% certain about that.
that it's, yeah, that the signage was definitely spec'd right. It was spec'd for a busier thoroughfare. So we do know that, but that, again, we had to pay to replace the signs, and I'm wondering if the people that don't like them would be very much happier with 30-inch signs than 36-inch signs.
Okay, but we're certain that that 30-inch sign difference is the only thing that we can change. There's nothing else that we could change in it.
That's what we've been told, right? Because we did state funding, so we had to fall under the Mass Highway guidelines for roadway construction.
Okay.
Yeah,
I hear about this all the time, and we were told we needed 36-inch. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that was wrong.
I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be great if we could just have this not go to town meeting and we resolve it in some other way.
Yeah, I think the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, I think we need to find out exactly what their petition is going to be. I think, because you can't get rid of everything, right? I mean, you still need crosswalk signs, you still need, there are other things, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, there are certain things that, like the signs that say crosswalk ahead, right? Like they had a tremendous amount of value in terms of people knowing that there's a crosswalk ahead, right? And I think there are certain ones that we certainly need, but we discussed this as a committee in terms of, you can't just get rid of, well, maybe we don't need these, but we kind of need these. It's got to really kind of be an all or nothing for some of those. I think there's certain things we could do, right? But again, it's a lot of these are in there for safety, and the whole reason we changed it was for safety, right? Like you can't, right? And as Tim said, you can't change the color of the signs, right? They want you to see them. But not knowing what, I can just see this turning into a mess at town meeting when we don't really know what they're asking to change, and we haven't been able to really thoroughly vet, what we can do, in terms of, not losing the funding, right? Because that's another thing, right? So, we remove all the signage and change it, right? Because, people are interested in doing that, and all of a sudden we have to repay $400 and some odd $1,000. This could be a significant, a significant vote, right? Where people think it's just signage. So
it seems like, Luke, they're either, how do you see that happening? Getting together with the people putting forth the petition and finding out specifically what it is they want and what it's possible to do.
Well, I think Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, TSAC, can just, we need to have a meeting anyway. I think maybe we definitely organize a meeting within the next, couple of weeks and invite whoever the individual was. Maybe I missed that meeting, which is unfortunate, but I don't remember somebody coming before the select board. So yeah, it might've been when I was traveling. So if we could arrange that, yeah.
I thought it was a man, actually. It came in in citizens input and said, I'm just putting you on notice that we're going to bring you a petition.
I thought it was a woman.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think two things happened. Remember, the woman sent an email that I think, Tim, you sent around to us saying this was something she wanted to do. And then I believe that it was a man who actually came to the select board meeting and spoke publicly to us. So let's move on. I'm just conscious of the time. But it
Okay,
sounds like
yep.
we've got a follow-up plan to meet with them. So that's great.
Okay, a couple of cleanup articles. 16 would rescind the unused borrowing authorization for the police station project, or the one that was proposed a few years ago. The town authorized the borrowing, but the borrowing was never made. So that literally counts against our debt number until we rescind that borrowing authority. So that's just kind of a housekeeping. Likewise, 17 is to close out capital projects that have small balances, projects that have been completed long ago, but there's a little bit of money left in those accounts, and the accountant would like to consolidate a number of those or close them out to free cash. 18, you'll recall the COA coming in and pitching the senior tax deferral program. We found out that we do need a town meeting vote to change the requirements of that program, so that's why that's on here. Likewise, with any changes to the cemetery fees, you are the cemetery commissioners and you set the fees. However, town meeting has to approve the fees that you propose. So it sounds to me like town meeting sets the fees, but anyway, we've got to have a proposal to go to town meeting, because you don't want to sort of throw it open to suggestions. So we need to have a schedule of fees for the cemetery. Number 20, Scott Triolo of the ARPA committee asked for a placeholder for any ARPA project that requires the town meeting vote, so that there may not be any, but we've got that there. There's a $7,500 IT purchase for an additional module to the Munis accounting system. And then the last two projects are rather large capital projects at the school, the Corey Building HVAC, 600,000, and the Wilkins Building HVAC, 615,000. And both of those projects, I understand, were submitted to the ARPA committee, so they were encouraged to kind of hedge their bets in a way and also propose it as town meeting warrant articles. I think if those two were funded by ARPA, that would almost be our entire allocation. So I think
It would be, yeah.
it's probably not going to happen, but Jim Moshe sent those over this afternoon. So that's kind of the universe of the articles that people have told us to expect beyond what we know will be on the warrant. And there's no particular order.
We did talk about those at ARPA, the last two, and there was some question as to whether it was air conditioning or ventilation, because from what we understand, but we're still learning about ARPA, but we think we can only use it for ventilation and not for, like other, it's weird.
Yeah.
Trust me. I see Wayne looking quizzically.
Yeah, but
I'm going to two more webinars about it this week.
I mean, doesn't HVAC have a filtration element to it?
If you're careful about it, yeah. If but I don't know enough about this project.
So I'm curious, why is 21 its own article? Why wouldn't that be in LT's long-term caps? $7,500.
I don't know. I thought that myself. The treasurer
seems
sent that in
silly.
this afternoon. Yeah, it ought to be part of the.
It needs to be part of long-term caps. I mean, they should decide. We shouldn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Shouldn't be putting that to the voters. That seems ridiculous. And then on the last two, like, what? Is this coming in 11th hour? You don't come in with $1 million capital request. Like, I don't understand. Like, that's something that, doesn't that need an MFC, a whole vetting process?
No, because MFC does not take care of the school buildings, which is why I want to have an umbrella organization that would look at all the things under.
Honestly, that comes up every year, every couple of years. That's got to get tucked in on the process, in my mind. You can't just, that kind of larding that in and it doesn't seem right to me. I don't like it.
Well, David, you're our liaison to the.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's the first
right?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I will take it up.
Okay.
I'm with you, Dave.
Definitely take it up.
I'm with you.
Okay. Wayne, any quick thoughts or reactions? We're running up against our the end of our meeting time, so but we'd love to hear from you if you have any comments.
Sure. Two really quick things to try to speed things up at the meeting, given that we're still likely to be under some level of COVID restrictions. One is, and particularly as I see this list, that we may want to take a more expansive view of the consent agenda. Typically, we've just put on articles, the ones that are recurring. A number of towns over the last 2 years, including perhaps most aggressively Concord, have not just done recurring articles, but looked at almost anything that in the wisdom of the moderator, their town manager, and select board members seem like they're likely to be non-controversial, and roll those into consent agenda. So I just want to highlight that as a potential thing that we might want to consider a little bit further down the road. Ultimately, I think that's kind of my call with, but I would be getting your input on it as well. A second thing that I just wanted to highlight for you is the question of electronic voting. The last time I brought it up to the then Board of Selectmen, I believe it was a prior board, and I don't believe any of you were on it, perhaps maybe Luke. The reaction I got was, well, we like to shout out our votes, and we like doing things the old way. We have our crank at the town election and so forth. But a couple of things lead me to think that we ought to be looking at it more closely this year. One, again, is anything we can do to speed up the meeting is really a question of public safety. Number two, a number of towns have successfully used ARPA funds to pay for acquiring electronic voting systems. And a third thing is that the governance task force has shown some interest in this, and that's one of their potential recommendations. I don't know whether it'll make their final cut. So I've discussed with Tim that perhaps a working group could be formed. Tim could organize it, and I could provide some input, but I think it's fine for it to be under the town administrator. And what the group could do would be to look into most of the companies that provide this service are willing to do trial runs. And so I thought this spring might be a nice opportunity to try it out at either very modest cost or no cost at all. And so I just wanted to highlight that as something that's coming, so that if you had any particular views, or if there are citizens out there who might be interested in this, having a small working group to help put it together would be very helpful.
Okay. Good. I think both suggestions are very worthwhile, Wayne. Thanks. So I think we.
Wayne, well, I was just going to say, I didn't see an application to ARPA for our town to do it, but I wanted to let you know there will be another application period coming up for the second half of the funds, if you think it ends up being a good idea and you want to write an application for ARPA.
Okay. So let's we'll continue to refine this. We've got a little work to do on a couple of different fronts to refine this. Tim, perhaps you could work with Wayne or town council to figure out, are there some parts of this, of the items listed under the potential warrant articles that go up to the upper section under the consent agenda, recurring articles. You can
Yep.
crack at doing that too.
Sure.
All right. If there are no other significant comments people want to make, let's move on. We're close to being done with our agenda, but we do have a few more things to cover. Wayne, thanks for joining us. You're welcome to stay as long as you like for this fascinating, the approval of minutes and warrants is our last item, but we've got a few other things before that. Tim, I'm going to move to you to share your administrator's report, please.
Okay, I understand it wasn't in the packet initially. I hope you see it now. We do have proposed 2 appointments to the Scholarship Committee and the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee.
All right, I move that we appoint Jane Redford Fern, we don't have an address, to the Scholarship Committee, and Andy Saussure Davison to the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee, TSAC.
Second.
Second. Did somebody second that?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. All right, any discussion? If not, let's take a roll call vote. Arnold, aye.
Oskalilowai, aye.
Brown eye.
David still here?
David?
Odell, aye. All right, Rita.
Majority.
Okay.
All right.
All
bathroom
right,
break.
the motion passes. And thank you to those folks for volunteering. That's always great to see. All right, Tim, what else do you have?
Just the informational item for the board in your packet. There's a draft agreement for the future management of the Wilson Memorial Chapel in the Green Cemetery by the Carlisle Historical Society. I think that, Nathan, were you involved in that at some point?
I was not. I think that they reached out to me about it.
Oh, okay.
I do have concerns about this and I will reach out to them. I mean, I think there's a big overlap here. I think it ignores Gary's role as, you know, it's available for services for burials. And we also do have the Historical Commission. You know, they're the town body that, you know, might do something like this. So I think we just, let me just work to make sure that everybody's working together on this. You know, I think, you know, my opinion, if they work through Gary and they want to do some, you know, tours of it, that's okay. But I'm not quite as in favor of just giving them carte blanche to own it, since that's really what Gary is responsible for.
Okay, very good. All right, and then we have a draft of the agenda for February 8th, although that's obviously going to change that a bit because we're not going to be hiring a new principal assessor. We've already done that, and Jen and I will be meeting with Barney and Dave on that agenda shortly. I guess after Barney gets back in town, maybe next Monday. Is that right?
Monday, I think we've talked about,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any individuals on the board who have liaison reports they'd like to make, very brief ones? No. Hearing none, good. We've worn each other down. Let's, the last thing is, so I'll just mention on the warrant items that were the warrant articles that I signed. The first one, which was for the payroll for the town and the school, it includes the December wages for the fire department, which are, you know, higher because we had more people staffing the COVID testing. The town bills, I think the two things of note are that the Greeno Dam project is in here, but that's all being covered by CPA funds. The 178,000 of this is for the Greeno Dam project. And we did spend $38,000 on COVID testing. again, that's going to be reimbursed through FEMA. But just to point that out. And then the final warrant was the school bills, and there's nothing unusual in there. Let's move on then to the minutes. Does anybody have any changes or comments on the minutes for, I don't have them right here in front of me. They were for,
September 14th.
yeah, which, is that the correct
first one.
date?
Oh,
No.
Oh, sorry, that's the executive session.
That's the
Sorry.
executive session. Yeah, I
Okay,
think
sorry.
this was,
Executive session. Oh,
Nathan, you're muted if you're saying something to us. Not just singing to yourself.
Talking to you, dog.
It's, everybody likes it when I'm muted. I move that we approve the regular meeting minutes for December 21st, 2021 and January 11th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Second, okay, yeah.
Thank you. Any comments?
No, they were.
All right, all those, let's take a roll call vote. All those in favor. Let's do this by roll call. Arnold, I.
Oscar, aye.
Brown eye?
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a motion to adjourn.
So move we adjourn?
Second.
Excellent. Roll call vote. Arnold, I.
Oscar, aye.
Brown eye?
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
All right.
Good night,
Thank you
everyone.
all for hanging in there,
Right.
and good work tonight, and we'll see you soon.
Have a
What
good.
time?